Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. A nauseating palace of Everest loomed over my head, and the gilded, meaningless path under my feet felt icy as I walk. Through the void. Then I saw it. The inhuman things sat upon its orate throne. Its abhorrent existence drew sustenance from the dwindling sanity of men in the face of ever-increasing desire. Such was the lord of the almighty dollar. I was not worthy to gaze upon it. I knelt before its ornate throne, and it grinned at me. Appendages of frigid insatiability shot out from the flesh of the beast and reached out for me. They held me tenderly. The world took on an ethereal otherworldly quality, and for the first time in my life, I truly saw. The beast reached out with more of its slender tentacle-like limbs. They slithered around me, entrapping me in the embrace of the beast. Mouths opened all around me, kissing me. They whispered and chanted quietly, enlightening me. And so Mammon lives again. And that was how I came to be. I had lived my life surrounded by piles of ill-gotten wealth. One could always earn something using means of dubious morality, conveniently timed words, and corporate backstabs. Money, power, prestige. I wanted it all. Of course, with karma being legit or something, I was reborn into easily one of the most screwed up, most stressful environments. That was discounting the fact that in 12 years I would be sentenced to death by the cold steel of Itachi's blade. Yeah, I was an Uchiha. God damn it. At least I still had my parents looked down at me with blazing sharing. They wanted the memory of their baby to be emlaced into their brains with the searing brand of the Sharingan's eidetic memorization. These people were little more than walking corpses, an NPC being puppeteered by a cruel god. In 12 years' time, they would all be dead. Their bodies would probably be desecrated by the likes of Orochimaru and Danzo. Power-hungry fools with little moral boundaries plucking tiny crimson orbs out of skulls. I would only be another body to desecrate, another pair of eyes to collect. That is, if I did nothing. Despite karma dropping off with a death sentence, the beast of Mammon had also given me all of the tools to survive, to thrive, even in this cruel world. Mother and father's eyes would become embedded into my own skull come time of the massacre. It's not like they would have much use for them when they were dead. The eternal Mangekyou sharing would be mine. Unless, of course, they didn't have Mangekyou. That would be problematic. But I had faith. The beast had whispered to me so many things. So many secrets. Enough secrets to blackmail the universe itself. Bang. FWH. Crash. The wall of the hospital blew off, revealing a village covered in fire. Was this the Kyuubi attack balls? My eyes burned as the beast crawled into the world. My twin, my master, my will. Mother and father were dying. Mega balls. Their blood flowed a crimson river. It washed over me. I bathed in the blood. I was a child of the blood. I was a child born in the midst of fierce combat. Crimson eyes went dormant in father's skull. He was already half dead from the initial explosion and was now on fire. He was looking rather like a burnt marshmallow. I giggled a little bit. My eyes bled. The beast crawled into my eyes, changing them to suit its needs. Malice flooded through my optical nerves, building upon them, changing them, improving them. Then I felt it, the loss. I was so without my suit. I was so empty without my obviously fake smile. I was so alone without my pile of wealth. And I was so lost without my world. I had died. The world that I knew had vanished. And I was lost. And so the beast fed on my loss. The beast fed on my desire to have something to own simply for the sake of ownership. There was nothing without possession. The world ran on the treadmill of Mammon. Mother had various pieces of shrapnel embedded in her body. She was bleeding profusely from the various wounds in her body. Thankfully, her eyes were untouched. They could still be scavenged. She looked rather like a strange cross between a turtle and a porcupine with the copious amount of debris that pierced her body. My undeveloped mouth produced more babble-like giggling. My eyes were on fire, and finally, the beast, satisfied, crawled out of my skull and hovered in the room in a nebulous cloud of avarice. Mother looked at me in horror. She opened her mouth in a silent scream. She repeatedly activated and deactivated her eyes in hopes that her infallible sharing were deceiving her. I considered her carefully. Were her eyes Mangekyou? The beast swooped down into Mother's skull and fixed her. Made her more useful. Were hot damn. I thought these things were supposed to be rare, right? Are they not? Actually, didn't the Uchiha have a practice of killing their closest friends to awaken the Maneku? Doesn't matter. How would I store them for when I was ready for the implant? I tried to force my underdeveloped infant body to crawl up her rapidly paling flesh, a task that proved to be impossible for my underdeveloped infant body. With a sweeping dive, the beast burrowed once more into my eye sockets and propelled me forwards with the wind of the divine. And suddenly, I was there. The beast grinned as it watched through my eyes with clarity that could only be achieved with the magical eyes of Samsara. I reached for her eyes. She was too weak to struggle. My chubby infant hands reached into her eye sockets. Her face was white with terror. The beast followed through my veins and guided my hand. Her eyes came out with a wet pop. The beast, content with its work, grinned, revealing a smile full of needle-like teeth. It spoke to me. Farewell, avatar of Mammon. Its eyes focused sharply upon my figure. A glaring red light spanned brightly in its eyes, enveloping the room in a scorching display. Conquer this world for Mammon, won't you? At age 43 seconds, I had unlocked the Mangekyou sharing. I'm just as confused as you are. The minute I woke up, I knew my Mangekyou abilities. My theory is that activation of the Mangekyou had connected pathways in my brain to give me an inherent understanding of the new abilities. They were lackluster when you compared them to the other ones displayed in the Naruto universe. With my left eye, I could do a short-range teleport. Fujin, it sounds pretty awesome at first, but when I said short range, I meant short range. I could probably go about half a meter at the very most in any direction. Honestly, just straight up walking would be way easier than using the Fujin. It may or may not be an exploitable ability in combat, but it didn't matter either way. Shiui managed to become absolutely broken using the freaking Shin, so I didn't see why I couldn't do the same. With my right eye, I could make an unbreakable genjutsu to make myself or any object invisible. Damaki. Unfortunately, this only covered the visual part of things. Any shinobi worth their salt would be able to find me by sound and maybe smell just as easily if I were visible. Datameki ended up being useful in the hospital though for hiding mother's Mangekyou sharing from the prying eyes of the MBU searchers. I was on the brink of unconsciousness when I used instinctively. Neither of my Mangekyou abilities had any much use in open combat. I would be reasonably good in infiltration with Damaki's obvious application and Fujin perhaps letting me get behind locked or sealed areas, but the moment I stepped on the battlefield would be the moment that I died. I suppose that with the Susanoo, perhaps I would be able to stand a chance, but manifesting a Susanoo would be harsh on my reserves, especially now as an infant. The only positive thing about my Mangekyou abilities is that neither of them used very much chakra. That fact isn't exactly relevant when you consider that I'll hardly be using either of them. I really hope that Mother's Maneku have something better in them. I also would barely be able to use the sharing until somewhere around Genin or Chunin. Since I skipped all Tomo stages, I was stuck using a fully matured Sharingan, which while better than the other Sharingan, was also harder on the chakra reserves. I would be a beast in combat for all of 30 seconds. Then I'd probably fall unconscious from chakra exhaustion. This Mangekyou, __, seems like a lot more trouble than it's worth. Especially because my Mangekyou abilities suck. Oh yeah, and compounded with all of that, __, because my parents died, I was passed on to a willing Uchiha adopter. Guess who was willing to take in a baby with a freaking Mangekyou? Every goddamn person in the clan. Guess whose word had the highest sway in the Uchiha clan? Freaking Uchiha Fugaku. You know, Sasake and Itachi's dad. I was their adopted brother. You've got to be, __, me at this point. Hey, being Itachi's brother now, maybe I'd be able to escape death at the Uchiha massacre the same way that Sasaki did. Hopefully. Oh yeah. Fugaku and Makoto, my new adoptive parents. The freaking Itachi and Sasuke's parents decided on my name as my parents didn't have time to being murdered by the Kyobi and all that. They named me Kyuki. Insanity. Real funny, guys. For the past few years, my life has been relatively peaceful. And by peaceful, I meant boring as hell. Kidding. It wasn't actually that bad. The Uchiha library was absolutely ridiculous. Imagine this. You've got Kakashi, a guy who supposedly copied over 1,000 jutsu using his sharing. Now you've got an entire clan full of sharing. Even if not all of them were of the same caliber as Kakashi, there were still tons of Uchiha over several generations, all of them armed with Sharingan. Ready to copy jutsu. I really don't understand why all Uchiha aren't walking jutsu libraries. There are thousands of jutsu in the library that they could learn. And actually, most of the good stuff was locked away in the less public part of the library. But still, they could do this thing where every year some of the older Uchiha would demonstrate some jutsu and the younger ones would copy them with their Sharingan so that they could potentially use the jutsu later on. Even if they didn't use the jutsu, they still knew it and could come up with counters. Why the hell wasn't every a living database? Maybe because of people like the Yamanaka. Actually, if every Uchiha knew a ridiculous number of jutsu and the enemy got their hands on their memories, then an enemy gets potentially hundreds of new jutsu. But even still, why not have some regulated jutsu be fed to the younger ones? Stuff that if it fell into enemy hands wouldn't matter too much. That would have made the way more powerful. Whatever. As the son of the clan head, I got privileges. I got servants to wait on me hand and foot, which kind of pissed me off. I can wipe my own, thank you very much. But the thing that really was awesome was access to the library. The whole library, ho ho, thousands of jutsu collected by generations of copycat Uchiha. I got the full experience of the Uchiha library, and I used it to the fullest. Being an Uchiha, my elemental affinity was fire, so I mostly took scrolls out of the fire section of the library. I picked out about a dozen jutsu every morning and speed read through them using the small amount of sharing usage I had access to. Hand seals, strengths, weaknesses, uses. I knew them all. I couldn't actually use most of the jutsu I learned. Me having child-sized chakra reserves, but one day I would be a walking jutsu library. Even if I did have the reserves, I still couldn't perform the jutsu. When you see someone perform a jutsu live, the sharing breaks down exactly how all the chakra moves and is manipulated. All you have to do now is build up the necessary skill to use the jutsu if you don't have it already. When you read from a scroll, you know all the hand seals and junk, but there's still an element of figuring things out afterwards. I probably could have learned more jutsu by having servants laying a bunch of them out in a row and sprinting past them with my mangu active, but I still felt weird using servants. I know I really shouldn't, but they were just uncomfortable. After an entire lifetime of doing things yourself, it feels wrong to have someone else do it for you. Now, I was 5 years old, which was old enough for Fugaku to start training me. I was taught in the Uchiha Clan specialized taijutsu style, which would make full use of the Sharingan, prioritizing speed over all else. With my already fully matured sharing, I could simply watch Fugaku run through the katas, build up the necessary strength and speed to use them, and execute them perfectly. A few months later, after my physical attributes had gotten better, I didn't just learn taijutsu, either. Fugaku had seen fit to give me various chakra control exercises to practice. I had currently mastered leaf sticking. Fugaku hadn't given me anything else, but privately I had basically mastered both tree walking and water walking. They were easy to do given my currently rather small chakra reserves. The only problem being was that I couldn't practice them for too long, which funnily enough was due to my small chakra reserves. The reason I could do them at all with the Sharingan, there was no aspect of failure in my training, only progress. The children of my age had not awakened their sharing yet, meaning that they had to train in the traditional method. They had to not only gain strength and speed, but also perform the katas correctly. The sharing's copying capabilities essentially cut out half of my training time. With the learning of taijutsu inevitably came sparring with other children. I pounded the children into the floor. It was the obvious outcome given the fact that not only was I being tutored privately by the clan head, but I had active sharing. The Sharingan was, however, not an instant W and button. Perhaps it would be given a few years, but as of right now, I could only keep my sharing on for 43 seconds. I timed it and then rounded down for safety. 43 seconds from the time I activated my sharing to the second I started feeling my reserves approaching empty. 43 seconds of speed reflexes. In combat, I had 43-second long window of time where I'd be able to use to sharing. I needed maximum efficiency to use my 43 seconds to the fullest. Thankfully, I could activate and deactivate the sharing as I wished, meaning that I could spread my 43 seconds out. That still doesn't give me anything good to use later on for the of ninja magic that is shinobi combat. I need something that'll either make people go, oh, damn, we're going to die, or an efficient jutsu to use continuously while fighting. There were numerous ways to go about getting either one of those things. The Susanoo, for one, I haven't actually tried using it for fear of using up too much chakra for my pathetic child body could handle. The Susanoo used up too much chakra to be good normal combat. Anyways, it would be for a strong single target or if I was soloing a large army. Another solution would perhaps come to me rather than me searching for it. Perhaps in some fight later down the road, I'd witness some badass jutsu and copy it. Of course, this would require me being in the field for a while, which meant that I would be out there fighting without a badass jutsu. I might be able to dig things up in the Uchiha library, though. I had mostly been searching for low-level jutsu that I'd be able to use pretty much right out of the academy and perhaps when I was nearing Chunin rank. Still, I had a limited amount of sharing time and I'm not sure scouring the library would be a good use of my sharing. So, looking for a good jutsu. The last solution would maybe be Mother's Mangu. I'm hoping for something that I can whip out on the front lines. I need something that's repeatable and has a relatively low cost while still being a direct attack. Something like a low-budget Amaterasu would be pretty good. Then again, I had never heard of Mother in the original series, so I doubt her Maneku were very notable. They probably had some lame crap that either was only good in infiltration or just wasn't useful at all. Speaking of Mother's eyes, a few months ago I had gotten my hands on a tube of preserving solution and put them in a storage scroll. All those things were stolen with a combination of Damaki's invisibility and my sharing. The sharing gun was perfect for seeing openings where I could steal stuff, even with the limited time I had with it. And while Damaki couldn't fool a shinobi, it could most certainly be used to sneak past civilian vendors. Mother's eyes were kind of icky. I had waited for too long to get preserving solution. Still nothing that a good Arnagi wouldn't fix and the preserving solution was legit. With the amount of interesting kek jankai out there, it was a top priority thing to have a good method of preservation. With chakra and all almost perfect preservation was relatively easy. This kind of depresses me. The thing with the merchants, it's a perfect demonstration of what a real shinobi should be like. Sneaky and all that, but it's nowhere near the kind of shinobi that I want to be. I want to be a ridiculous unkillable soldier on the open battlefield. Not someone that is this stealth bullcrap. All of my current abilities point towards a stealth specialist, and I hate it. I need something good from your eyes, Mother. Of course, the Shin could potentially be the only jutsu I need. It's a low-cost jutsu that paired with my evolved sharing could potentially make me ridiculous on the battlefield. Shui did it before. I'm sure that with a little practice, I could do the same. Thud. I looked at the downer child with dispassionate eyes. My newest challenger beaten into the ground like all the rest. He picked his battered body off the ground and we made the seal of reconciliation. I offered him a small smile and gave him a thumbs up. Hopefully, Itachi would see how much of a nod, I was and spare me come time of the massacre. Brushing myself off, I walked back to my adoptive father, Fugaku. He was giving me a small smile. The smile was a proud, fatherly one. No doubt about it. He was proud of me for being able to kick all the tiny asses of the other little Uchiha children. Follow me, Kyuki. Fugaku spun around and marched off in the standard stiff Uchiha. Stick up your walk. The Uchiha stick up your walk wasn't as stiff or unnatural as the Hyuga. Stick up your walk. But it carried a more haughty, arrogant weight to it. I followed Fugaku through the clan compound. The Uchiha crest adorned practically every surface in the compound. It was kind of overbearing, honestly. Big brother's watching you. The fact that the crest always kind of reminded me of a lollipop only served to make things even more ridiculous. Come on, I can't be the only one, right? The Uchiha crest does look like a lollipop. Fugaku lead me closer to I see where this is going. Fugaku was taking me to the lake at the edge of the Uchiha compound. I was going to do that rite of passage thingy that the Uchiha do, that shoot a fireball over a lake or you're not one of us thing. Fugaku put on a serious face, giving off an air of dignity and nobility. Uchihyuki, do you swear? Boring speech time. Teach me the stupid fireball already. Actually, now that I think about it, has the grand fireball jutsu ever hit anyone? That thing has a ridiculously low success rate. Probably because it was unnecessarily large and flashy. Why did they teach all aspiring Uchiha shinobi the jutsu then and uphold the honor of the Uchiha clan? You must, or maybe the fireball was actually effective, but since you can't kill of enemies right away in anime and manga, the fireball always misses. Perhaps the low success rate of the fireball was just to prolong fight scenes or refined. We are not common soldiers. We are Uchiha. Should you? Damn, this speech is taking forever. Why the hell would he take so much time going through such a wordy speech? Most 5-year-olds wouldn't even be able to understand it anyways. Even those that did probably wouldn't pay much attention to it. Or maybe I was just an that couldn't respect authority figures. Wait a minute. Why was I learning the fireball so early? If I remember correctly, don't most Uchiha learn the fireball sometime during the academy? The Mangekyou thing was probably pushing them to do the fireball over a lake thingy sooner. So, Uchiha, I ask of you, will you throw your all into the way of a shinobi? Will you honor the way of our ancestors? Will you be an Uchiha? Hi, Fugaku. Dono, then throw this fireball over the lake. Woot woot the system. Anarchy. One of us. One of us. I'ma go bone your mom after this. Yeah, okay. I might have paraphrased and exaggerated what he said a little bit, but I doubt you'd want to hear the boring ass speech that came after the first boring ass speech. Seriously, doesn't this guy have anything better than giving inspirational speeches to 5-year-olds to do? Whatever. Onto the cult induction. Air clan rite of passage. Let's see. I'm fully tanked up on chakra. Refilled from my jutsu blitz this morning. 43 seconds should be plenty to memorize the fireball. Ah. He's starting now. Tiger, ram, monkey, boar, horse, tiger, and fireball. There really aren't that many. I could have just memorized them normally. But now with the sharing, I'll never forget them. Plus the added bonus of seeing how the chakra moves and whatnot. 40 seconds of Mangekyou time left. That should be enough chakra to power up the fireball. Running through the hand seals. Fire chakra built up in my stomach. I breathed out orange flames which coalesced into a fireball about a meter in diameter. I looked at the fireball that hovered in front of me. This thing is bright as, I'll have to fix that sometime. I did a variation of the traditional Uchiha fireball. Instead of the normal fireball, I breathed out a continuous stream of fire. That's right, I'm a walking flamethrower. It's not actually as impressive as I make it sound. The flamethrower variation is something that can be done with very little effort. The grand fireball is basically just the user breathing out fire and condensing it into a ball. This variation just removes the condensing into a ball part of the jutsu. It's actually something that virtually all Uchiha learn how to do. But still, flamethrower, although it used up quite a bit of chakra, I quantified all my chakra in terms of how long I can keep my sharing active. I kept consta. NT tabs on the amount of chakra in my system. Every night, right before I went to sleep, I timed the number of seconds I could keep my mangu on without feeling my reserves dip into a dangerous area. I could now safely use my Sharingan for just over a minute. 63 seconds to be exact. I had measured each jutsu that I knew carefully in terms of Mangekyou time. I carefully measured out exactly how many seconds of my precious Mangekyou time that were siphoned away with each jutsu. My findings were rather depressing. Apparently, both of my Mangekyou abilities cost less than a grand fireball. It was kind of sad how both of my Mangekyou abilities costed less than AC rank jutsu like the grand fireball. I guess it kind of put into perspective how lame they were. Maybe I'd use them someday. Who knows? Nah, they're pretty useless. Maybe I could use them as a distraction. There's an idea. Perhaps one day I'd figure out how to apply them in combat. Until then, they serve little purpose other than to help me steal things from merchants. It's a big day for me. I'm going to the academy today. Although, I'll probably be bored as hell during my academy years considering the fact that I already had taijutsu and enjutsu training and I had read the Boo KS in the library pertaining to history. But hey, at least it gave me a chance to prove my superiority over a bunch of small children. That's bound to fun. I wore the typical blue Uchiha Hyla t-shirt with the Uchiha lollipop plastered on the back of it. Makoto, my adoptive mother, tried to get me to wear some white cargo shorts for pants, but I flat out refused, instead opting for some standard black shinobi pants. If I put those cargo shorts on, I would basically be a Sash pre-Shaputan clone. Sans the dark-ass hair. My hair was more straight, resembling Itachi's. Itachi hadn't played a huge role in my life. He was almost always busy with his ambu work or whatever, but whenever he did see me, he seemed really happy to be around me. I'm pretty sure that's a good sign. Sasake survived before in canon, and Itachi likes me, right? I'm not going to die. Yeah, speaking of Sasake, he was standing there next to me wearing the same exact outfit as seen in canon, the one that Makoto tried to get me to wear. See, here's what I don't understand. Why would Makoto try to dress up both of her sons in the exact same outfit? That's just weird. While we're on the topic of Sasake, he seemed very quiet. Wasn't he supposed to be pretty chill before the massacre? Perhaps it was due to him being in the shadow of not one but two brothers, one of which wasn't even his biological brother. Thinking back to it, Fugaku didn't really pay Sasake much mind and instead either spent his time training with me or fawning over Itachi when he was home. I felt a little bit bad now. My existence in this world left a child devoid of any fatherly interaction. Although in canon, Fugaku didn't exactly pay much attention to Sasake either. Not until Itachi grew estranged from him anyways. Could I use Sasuke's loneliness to my advantage? I probably could, but would I? On one hand, I was manipulating a small impressionable child, which was a little bit hard on the little morality I had. On the other, if I played my cards right, I had an eventual demigod on my side. Hey, Sasake, you ready for the academy today? My choice was made. Why? I looked around at the classroom I was in. I was sitting in the back corner in the protagonist spot near the window. Sasake, despite only rarely having interacted with me, chose to sit in the spot next to me. Was he really that neglected? Didn't he have Itachi to chill with though? Aruka was droning away in a math lesson. I couldn't care less about the 1+2 garbage that he was droning on about, so I didn't really listen. It was just like canon, with the exception of me. And just like in canon, all of the clan heirs were all bunched together in this tiny classroom. It was probably suffocating for Aruka to teach in a room this loaded with political tension with the clan heirs in addition to the blonde idiot himself. Hey, I'm not late, am I? Speaking of the devil, freaking Naruto barges into the room 20 minutes into the lesson. Naruto proceeds to sheepishly rub his hand on the back of his neck in response to Aruka's yelling and sits down in the only empty seat in the classroom, which happened to be the one that was right next to the two Uchiha in the class. Ooh. Here's my chance to make both Ashura and Indra my friends. Actually, this classroom is the perfect chance for me to make acquaintances with all of the powerful heirs. They were bound to be powerful both politically and physically, so it would be advantageous to at least be on speaking terms with all of them. I really need to get some friends. I didn't exactly have many friends in the clan. Most of the children stayed away from me, either at the request of their parents for fear of upsetting the son of the clan head or by their own choice, trying to ostracize the one who beat them all in Pars. In any case, I had very few friends. Perhaps it was also due to the fact that I often practiced my genjutsu at them. Cloaked in damaki, I would force a genjutsu onto them, often some sort of horrific monster or creepy feeling. Sometimes I'd even follow them, turning their rice into eyeballs, their water into blood, and even their own limbs into horrific decaying messes. Even when I wasn't messing with them directly, I still walked around with a shadow that seemed just a bit too long and had just a few too many limbs. Sometimes my form would flicker into some horrific walking corpse only to transform back into my normal form. I love genjutsu. Hey, don't look at me like that. I've got a whole future's worth of shinobi combat to get through. I need to practice. The fact that genjutsu were the only non-chakra taxing things to practice from the stuff I got from the library. And the fact that they were practically on easy mode with the sharing had absolutely nothing to do with it. Got to build up that chakra control somehow. So yeah, with the Uchiha Clan's children, I became associated with creeping shadows, creepy stalking specters, and horrific monsters that seemingly popped out of nowhere. I hope I get Karani as a sensei. Anyways, back to the class. I wonder if I could genjutsu them into being my friends. Nah, there's too much of a risk in being caught by the teachers. But I need the potential political support that I could gain with being their friends. Perhaps I could genjutsu the teachers as well. That could be an idea. Sparring class on the first day. Hell yeah. The teacher divided the class into 2 groups. Those that already had training prior to the academy and those that were entirely new. He took the new kids to show them the cats and whatnot for the basic academy style, and an assistant lead the rest of us off to spar. It made sense, I suppose, to divide us up by skill, but it also fostered a sense of division that was made very clear by the rather unfriendly rivalries that sparked in the academy. Wasn't Konoha supposed to be the friendship is magic village? It's probably just something that I'm not seeing. Ouch. Sasaki had went to join the group of students that said that they had received no training before. I guess that he really hadn't. What with me taking up all of Fugaku's time. That kind of bums me out a bit. Seeing neglect to this degree. I'll have to fix that later. Right now though, I'm really hoping that he doesn't get a chance to spar. He'll definitely lose against whoever he's pitted against. A loss that'll ensure a scolding from Fugaku. Nice. I'm up first. I was partnered with Ka for sparring. By the time the assistant teacher lined us up and had us make the hand sign of conflict thingy, he was already itching to go, feet SC. Raping on the ground and everything. I, on the other hand, assumed a ready and aggressive position in the Uchiha style. I was planning on taking him out fast and hard right away. Even without the Mangekyou active, I was still able to plot out several different courses of action. It never paid to be arrogant, and it'd be the laughingstock of the Uchiha clan if the gilded Mangekyou baby lost his first sparring match. The assistant placed his arm between us. With a downwards chop, he cried out, Hajime. I immediately leapt forwards. Ka was a different sort of fighter than the other Uchiha children. With the Uchiha, I was fighting against techniques that I already knew in and out, ones that I practiced myself. Ka was a brawler. His techniques were much different from the Uchiha clan's precise and efficient movements, relying more on sweeping and heavy attacks. He pulled his arm back, telegraphing his punch. His fist snapped forwards, but I was already well out of the way. He was stronger than me. I'll give him that. But my speed, reflexes, and overall skill were higher than his. I found gaps in his guard, weak points in his every step. His movements were predictable and left him wide open. My fists impacted against his exposed body. All too soon, he fell to the ground. A bruised heap of failure. Victory. I stood in front of Ka's fallen form as he slowly struggled to his feet. He glared at me. He detested my superiority in combat. I reached my hand out for him. A peace offering. He looked first at my hand, then at me. He sneered and slapped my hand away, opting for getting up himself. Okay. Then I turned away and stuffed my hands in my pockets, not even bothering to make the traditional seal of reconciliation after the spar. I knew what meant. He also knew what that meant. The lack of a seal of reconciliation means that the conflict hasn't been resolved. It's ongoing. I'm coming for you. I know I said that I wanted to make acquaintances with the clan heirs and possibly forge alliances with them, but damn it, this guy pisses me off. I'm not sure how long the class lasted or even who else sparred after us. But as I leveled a hard glare at Ka, I knew that the game was on. Seriously, pop quiz on the first day. I hate teachers like these. I have clan standards to uphold, so if I get anything less than a top score, I'll be failing in the eyes of my clan. I already knew all the answers to the test, but just in case. How to cheat as subtly as possible. Or is it even worth the risk? Sharing imperfect memory. After all, I shouldn't have any of my answers be wrong. But there's just this nagging doubt, this horrible feeling. And if that feeling proves true, I'll be ashamed to the entire who am I kidding? I just want an excuse to be a sneaky ninja in an actual active environment. Maybe a localized dome to cover up the glow of my sharing. Then a quick sweep around the room. No, the damaki would render my eyes invisible, giving anyone that looked a nice view into the inside of my skull. I, like many Uchiha, have relatively long hair, so maybe if I shadowed my eyes with my hair, then took a very brief look around, I'd probably be fine. Probably is not definitely, though. Is the risk worth the reward? Relatively moderate risk to a chance at maybe getting 1 or 2 questions slightly more correct. Why the hell not? Actually, wasn't Aruka a censor or something? Or at least had some sort of echolocation jutsu. Or even if he didn't, he was probably proficient enough in the ninja arts as a teacher to tell when chakra was being used. If I started exuding more chakra than was ordinary, he would be able to tell right away that something was up. No cheating for me, I guess. I decided to take the scenic route back to the compound, jumping along tree branches in the forest. I noticed Sasaki scampering along the forest floor behind me, struggling to keep pace. Really, he was already that attached. That's a good thing, I suppose. The more attached he is, the more he'll care if I die, and the lower the chance of me being murdered by Itachi is. I crouched down on the branch I was on and jumped to the ground. I landed next to Sasaki with a soft tap as my feet hit the ground. Sasaki, startled, stumbled and stared wide-eyed at me as I started walking forwards. Sasaki brushed himself off and joined me, matching my leisurely pace to the compound. It was a good first day at the academy. After starting the academy, my training routine became even more intense. I suppose it made sense. I was the figurehead of my clan's youth right now, and the clan could not afford to look weak. Every supplementary lesson was given rapt attention. Every sparring match was taken seriously. There was no holding back anymore during matches. The children I beat into the ground would thank me one day for painfully pointing out their weaknesses. I was no longer uncomfortable with the servants and decided to make full use of them. The library was combed every night for books relevant to my skill set by servants. Books on slightly more advanced genjutsu, fire jutsu, and even some very basic training exercises for lightning and wind. These three elements, especially lightning and fire, were what would probably end up being the basis of my fighting technique. The books would be laid out for me by dawn, and I would scan through them at light speed with my mangekyou until my chakra ran low. I started adding more variety into my skill set. The only weapons that I had trained with up until this point were kana and shuriken. It was not enough. Weapons of every variety were added to the mix. Katanas, shakudos, kamis, kusrias, battle fans, bow staves. Whatever I could get my hands on, I used my sharing to gain a cursory understanding and basic proficiency with. When I added sunbond to steadily growing armory, I picked up the habit of spinning them around my fingers. It was rather similar to pen spinning back home. The needle-like weapons would be spun, thrown, and caught by my fingers. I needed to increase my dexterity. I needed to do anything I could to make my hands faster, to make them more capable of hand signs, wielding weapons, drawing seals, and realia. Nothing else. The standards had been raised, and I would not let my clan down. With all of the new weapons, I needed a place to store them all. I ended up buying a pair of braces with storage seals in them to store a good number of them. The braces actually didn't have the capacity to store all of my weapons, so I ended up also getting bandages with storage scrolls printed all over them and wrapping them around my forearms. I'm not just training with weapons either. I've been trying to improve my genjutsu, finding more and more ways to get my chakra to others. It's relatively easy to implant illusions through eye contact now with the sharing, especially I'm trying to get my chakra to travel through other means though, for example through chakra strings and thrug. H sounds. My chakra strings are too glowy to be effective stealthily, and so far I've been unsuccessful with auditory genjutsu. I still do throw genjutsu at random children with my sharing. Oh. It never fails to get a chuckle out of me when I pass by little kid and they suddenly scream in horror and run from imaginary monsters. Good times. I don't have a problem, do I? Nah, we're good. In the little free time that I have, I've taken to training and sparring with Indra. In the future, Indra will turn out to be a monster of a shinobi and an undeniably good asset to have, especially with all that magical extra sharing power, that comes with existing as an Uchiha. Indra has been taking to the training rather well. His prodigy nature isn't as pronounced as Itachi's, but he's definitely talented. It's like sharpening a sword. Indra will become my weapon to wield. Ka and I have been partnered up for sparring once again. I'm rather excited to be fighting him again. I've improved drastically since the last time that we've sparred, and I've been getting antsy to try out my new moves. Most of the other children were looking in our direction. Our last sparring match had been rather one-sided and had rather dramatically, so many were looking for entertainment or gossip material. Ku looked much more contained and disciplined this time around. He was still a brawler type, but he had definitely received more training. His more predictable and open attacks would likely be more guarded this time. I assumed a slightly more defensive position. His style had probably changed more than mine had. So, I would stay reactionary and observe for a bit to see if there was anything ridiculous that he could pull out. Hygiene. And we were off. Sure enough, Ka was more careful and guarded than last time. Instead of charging headfirst into the fight, he stayed back and observed. It wasn't quite something that he naturally did, as he was noticeably holding himself back. It was likely something that the clan beat into him after his defeat last time we sparred. I tensed slightly and leaned forwards and then relaxed back into my former pose. Ka, being overeager to start fighting, immediately started forwards a few steps until he saw that I actually hadn't moved. Embarrassed, he pulled back. He definitely was told after the last spar to be more cautious in combat. Evidently, the lesson hasn't truly settled in yet. I decided to make the first move and dashed sideways to the left. Ka reacted quickly, reflexively mirrored the movement, running to intercept me. I quickly switched directions and went to the right. Ka again mirrored my movements. Making use of the extensive footwork that had been drilled into my head, I ran towards Ka in a complicated zigzagging pattern. KBA tried to do the same, but couldn't get his feet to move fast enough. While KBA was off balance from trying to mimic my movements, I struck. A quick flurry of hits was sent his way. A few of them would probably bruise, but none of them looked like they would put him down. He's become more durable, it seems. The punches served their purpose, however, and had thrown him off balance enough for me to deliver a heavy kick to his left side. The kick would slow him down and force him to favor one side over the other. Ka, regaining enough sense to function again, lashed out in all directions in hopes of getting a hit in. A quick backstep on my part put me out of the range of his hits. He apparently was more injured from my hits than I realized. He appeared rather weak and tired, panting heavily. Only a few more good hits in and he would probably be done for. Greedily, I circled back to deliver more punches and thud. My breath rushed out of my lungs, and I stared wide-eyed at Ka. That sneaky bastard. Ka's fist had landed square in my chest with a surprising amount of speed. Gasping for breath, I retreated. Damn it, he was faking weakness. I mean, we're ninja, so we're supposed to be sneaky like that, so good for him, I guess. But still, it pisses me off. My expression must have been rather hilarious, being shocked by Ka's hit and all as the children around me started sniggering. Stop laughing, all of you. I stood confused at the high-pitched laughter of children. There was something in the laughter that seemed a little more sinister. My eyes itched and burned. Forgetting the fight entirely, I began to rub at them. There was something wrong here. Close your mouths before I drown you in my hate. Rising from his position, Ka smirked triumphantly at his small victory. I felt a bit of irritation at his smug expression, and suddenly the children twisted. Their laughter spiraled into insanity. Their bodies hung on ebony crucifixes stretched into the crimson sky. The grotesque, disfigured faces converging into the cancerous growth of the moon. The disgusting carmine faces stretched and cannibalized one another, spraying a flood of crimson fluid from the crying eye of the moon. The faces gleefully giggled as they consumed one another. They were laughing. They were all laughing. I will not be mocked by these children. The hate sunk in. Ka was only something standing in the way. These children on the sidelines were only in my way. Get thee out of the way. The edges of my vision were stained black and crimson, and the world span into infinite pinwheels. The details of the fight were preserved crystal clear with my sharing. I had brutalized KBA, smashing his face in. It was automatic. I was on a Hatred-fueled autopilot at the time. Ka ended up needing to go to the hospital and remain in the intensive care unit for a few weeks. He'll make a full recovery, but if I had dealt any more damage than I had, he may have had permanent damage. A few children after witnessing the event ended up taking a break for a few days, and others quit the academy entirely. The assistant instructor that was proctoring our spar handed in his resignation form only a few days after the spar. Fugaku had only mildly reprimanded me. Relations between the stuck-up and formal Uchihas and the boisterous Inukas had never been very good, and such a violent spar was absolutely fine. As far as the power-obsessed were concerned, the only reason that Fugaku scolded me at all was because the offense would be visible on my shinobi record, and something like that wasn't quite what one would want to see in a prospective shinobi of the leaf. I decided to go out and train. If I could find Indra, I'd spar with him as well. What the fight with Ka had taught me was that either my progress was starting to slow down or other children were starting to catch up to me in terms of skill. It was only a few weeks ago that I couldn't even be touched in a spar. The fact that Ka manages to get a solid punch in was a sign that I had to pick up the pace with training. I should have been able to see that he was faking weakness. And even if I couldn't, my reflexes should have been good enough that I could dodge the hit anyways. The clan wouldn't accept anything else. After all, I'd probably go to one of the Uchiha training grounds. Maybe I'd also make a pit stop at the Uchiha armory, too. I'd have to see if I could find any stealth seals. I was thinking that I could perhaps sneak into a training ground when a particularly powerful Uchiha like Itachi or Shiui was training and steal their techniques. To avoid being seen even by the sharing, I could cloak myself in Damaki. To avoid all the other stuff from being detected, I could slap a whole truckload of seals on myself. Stuff like chakra suppression seals, odor disguising seals, the works. On my way out, I saw Itachi walking into the house. He graced me with a friendly smile, something that a family might regard another with. But there was something in his eyes that was colder than anything that I had seen before. Those eyes, they spoke of something deeper. Behind the coal, there was a crimson flame. It licked at logs and consumed them. It crackled in cruel, fiery laughter. Why are you laughing? The flames stretched into cold infinity. They soared into inky spirals in the scarlet heavens. The eye of God peered down at the ruined, craggy landscape. Ash rained from the open floodgates of flame. The ash poured in a torrential flood. A blizzard of soot was swirling around me, coalescing into shadowy figures. The shadows were images of myself. The shadows caught on fire, screaming in pain. They were not me, but others. Their ash and skin burned away to reveal that they were only hollow shells. The inferno spat out paper. The paper drifted around me. I snatched one from the air and saw that it was a comic. No, a page from a manga, Naruto. And then I remembered the Uchiha clan would fall and Itachi would be one to end it. I realize now I've immersed myself too deeply within this fictional world I've found myself within. I've forgotten the future in favor of short-term goals. Beating up car training, my little goals were distracting me. The cold fire burned brighter in Itachi's eyes, and I knew that no, I would not be spared. Itachi would spill my blood just as he would everyone else. Everyone but Indra, that is Indra. He was the one, the only real Uchiha. The rest of us were doomed to die. To die at the hands of the icy crimson fire. Time slowed down at that moment. Itachi's eyes were drowning me. It was suffocating. The clock was ticking. The sand in the hourglass was drifting downwards. Time was running out. How could I escape this? How was I so casual about this man? How was I so careless, so carefree? Is something the matter, Kyuki? He asked me, his voice spilling with false concern. Stop it. Stop pretending to care. Fujin Damaki. I want to run. I want to hide. I nervously swallowed and looked at him. What? My eyes were starting to burn. Get away from me. Murderer. Your sharing activated. Are you all right? I glanced around and took in the unreal clarity with which I saw the world. I really had activated my sharing in my panic. I flicked my eyes back to him. I'm fine. Good. He smiled. I was worried for a minute. I saw the truth. His smile was cold. A thin mask draped over and concealing the flethen. His icy smile was scorched into my memory with the searing brand only afforded by the sharing. I hate you. I hate you so much. I will erase you one day. I was training now for a different reason. I wasn't training for the pride of the clan or even personal pride. I was training for survival. How could I cheat death? How could I escape Itachi's grasp? I couldn't fight him, that was for certain. I could no sooner fight the Reaper, Itachi, than I could fight the sky or the ocean. My plan to cheat death was to graduate and start going on missions as soon as possible. Hopefully, by the time that the massacre happened, I would have already been going on missions outside of the village walls. One of the missions would conveniently go horribly wrong and Uchiha would die. I would have to tie up all of the loose ends. Of course, I had to gain enough strength, either kill my entire team or gain enough skill in genjutsu to fool them into thinking that I was dead and that my body was a retrieve. Able. That was the key, leaving no evidence. If they clearly saw me die, but also thought that they could find my body, they would attempt to look for it, then finding no body would realize that I had pulled a runner or was taken captive by another village or whatever. Then they'd go off and expend lots of resources to try to chase me down. The stealth and genjutsu option was most certainly the easier option in terms of pulling it off, but killing my entire team would be safer for preventing the knowledge that I had gone rogue from the village. Both of them seemed very nearly impossible to pull off anyways, but until I thought of anything better, they were my options. In any case, I had to train harder. I had to truly push myself to the limits. I'm certainly beyond the skill of those in my class, but to graduate early enough to secure a team to go on missions with, I had to truly be a prodigy. I had to be someone that could stand on the same level as Itachi and Kakashi. I had been trained since childhood, but I had never truly pushed myself to overperform. My training was intense, but it was nowhere near backbreaking. I thought that the rate at which I had been accumulating skill was more or less sufficient. I foolishly allowed the traitorous thoughts of good enough to seep into my mind. No more. When practicing my punches against a training post, I didn't train until my knuckles were bruised. I practiced until they were broken and bleeding. When running, I always pushed myself to do just one more lap. Then another, and then another, and another, until I grew too weary for movement, tripped over my own feet, and collapsed where I lay. There was always more to do. The first early examination that I could take was only a few short months away. With this my old world, I would have been convinced that there was no chance that I could be in shape by that time. But in this world, my shattered body could be given chakra-based treatment and could be in good enough happy to train once more the next morning. To pass the mental part of the exam, I would have to get creative. The vast majority of my childhood reading material had been done on various topics pertaining to chakra and the like rather than history. I did read history, but not nearly as much as I did other topics, and most certainly not enough to pass that portion of the exam. Thankfully, however, I was the child of the clan head. There were always strings to pull, favors to call in. I managed to secure a copy of the answers to this year's exam, and I memorized them with my sharing. It was cheating, but I didn't care, though, just in case they mixed things up in the exam. I had servants read books aloud as I trained. I trained long into the night. Then, when my battered and broken body finally collapsed from exhaustion, the servants picked me up and dropped me into the care of the Irian. Fugaku knew full well what I was doing. Instead of acting like a normal, concerned parent, endorsed my training efforts. He actually paid for a dedicated room and Irian at the compound for healing me. After my training, there was so much to do and so little time. The lessons at the academy were given very little attention. I had already learned everything that was required of me to know. So instead of listening, I refined my chakra control under the table. Leaves were brought into the classroom from outside and worksheets meant to be used in class were posed into surfaces to stick to. I tried another chakra exercise in which instead of sticking the leaves or paper onto an area of my body, I would float them just above my skin with a constant stream of chakra emissions. It was rather similar to water walking, which I was already proficient in. I had tried to see if I could mold my chakra to the other side of the leaf and hold it in place like some sort of chakra clamp. I had been met with little success in prior attempts. This time proved to be no different. As my chakra control slipped, the leaf wobbled and slipped from my grasp. The leaf flitted through the air for a few seconds until it settled on the floor just out of my reach. Insufficient. That was my last leaf. Damn it. I took a quick glance at our teacher. He was droning on about some inane math that I had long since mastered. Aruruka was conveniently absent today for undisclosed reasons. I was confident that this no-name background character Chunin didn't have sensor abilities. I usually couldn't use any jutsu with chakra usage higher than the leaf sticking exercise or else Suruka would detect them. I poked a single finger outwards. A single chakra thread began to spin its way out of my extended digit. I tried to keep the glow of the thread to its absolute minimum. My skill with them wasn't nearly refined enough to make entirely invisible strands of chakra. I would have to make do. The chakra thread slithered across the floor. The end of the string tried to poke at the leaf. It flopped around on the floor near the leaf, responding to my untrained and imprecise directions. When I finally managed to have the thread touching the leaf, I forcefully applied my chakra through the thread, attempting some form of long-range tree walking. I ended up putting way too much chakra into it, and the leaf exploded with a loud crack. For sake, the entire class turned to the source of the noise. I immediately dismissed my chakra thread and tried to act casual. A few of the students in the class most definitely saw the string, but chose not to expose me, opting instead to shoot me weird looks. They otherwise pretended that nothing had happened. The teacher had probably seen the threat as well. They were a tunin after all, so they were at least somewhat skilled. However, perhaps out of fear of angering the Uchiha clan for disciplining the clan head's son, he chose to say nothing. The shunshin was an absolute pain. Well, not exactly. It only took a bit of reading and a day or two of experimenting to figure out how to use the jutsu. The problem laid with using it well. There was a reason that most ninja didn't use the shunshin in combat. Despite its apparent usefulness, the instant transition from one place to another was disorientating, and it threw many off. With the high-speed processing of the sharing, especially the mangekyou, the transition was no longer a problem. In fact, my eyes processed at a fast enough rate to actually be able to perceive myself moving as I used the shin. But there was the problem. I couldn't accurately use the shunshin without the aid of the sharing. I had a precious little amount of time with my sharing and I couldn't waste a single second of it. Though my reserves had grown, I still couldn't use my mangu for any longer than about 3 minutes. 3 minutes of sharing time and the shinin was just fine for a short battle with an average ninja genin. And even most shunin would fall nearly instantly as I zipped to them with the shunshin. Even groups of them wouldn't really be a problem as the low chakra cost of the shin made it possible for me to use it over and over. It wouldn't be enough for a fight with a Junin level opponent. They would be able to react to it and counter it with relative ease. They would whittle my strength away, batting away my strikes like they were nothing. All the while, I would burn through my precious time with the Sharingan, leaving me with nothing to defend myself with, as the shunshin was no longer a viable option without the Sharingan. There were, of course, other jutsu that I could use. But looking back on most of them, I had only picked them out of the library because they looked cool rather than considering their actual utility. There were a scarce few that I would consider using regularly in combat. None of them matched the level of versatility that the shunshin afforded. And so I labored. I worked long and hard trying to perfect the shin to a point that I could use it effectively in combat without my sharing active. I failed. Insufficient. You are insufficient. The shinin began to soak up too much of my time. I tried my hardest to make it work without my sharing, but after spending a week or so trying, I decided to drop it for now. With the first round of early exams just a week away, I wanted something that could make me stand out from the rest of the crowd. I wanted to be truly exceptional. If I stood out as an extraordinary student, I would get the best Junin sensei and therefore progress at a faster rate. The Shan would have accomplished that goal had I perfected it. But there was no time. The Shanhen would be good enough as it was for now. I decided to simply train in the basic areas of shinobi combat. I refined my taijutsu and improved my usage of weapons. I was proficient enough in every area that I felt mattered. I had studied and cheated enough to secure a pass in the academic portion of the exam. Come next week, I would pass. I would secure a team. I was certain I passed the genin exam and was filled with a euphoric relief. Perhaps there was hope that I wouldn't die come the massacre. There was nothing glamorous in my pass. I was no Itachi. I didn't impress any of my instructors and I certainly didn't graduate at the top. I was hovering somewhere near the bottom of the class. Even though I had cheated in the academic portion, I still barely managed to make the cut. But I graduated and I did it in just a single year. Something that very few could attest to having done. I had to go to a different room for my team assignments as the class 1 normally was with Ashura and in. Dra weren't graduating. I eagerly paid attention to the team assignments, listening for my name. Team 4 will be Satoru Chiba, Tommy G. Koshi, and Kumihara. You will be under the Jun Shibuya Hasano. Team 7 will be Oof Unlucky Ninja. Those guys, they'll be assigned to Kakashi and be doomed to fail. A rough start to a ninja career for sure. And Uchihyuki and Goi Hikari will go into the genin reserves. What? I spoke up. Excuse me. The instructor looked irritated at having to repeat himself. You and Gihikari will go into the Genin Act of Reserves to be given priority for team placement the next year. It took me a few moments to absorb that fact. I had passed, but I wouldn't be assigned a team. Who are the idiots in charge of assigning teams had decided that? No, seriously. I was the child of the head of the Uchiha Clan. Why the hell did they think that it was a good thing to shunt me to the side? A smile full of malicious mirth began to form on my lips. Oh. Fugaku would have their asses for this. And that was how I got Karana as my sensei. Fugaku ended up throwing such a giant hissy fit that the village decided to grant me my own chunin in an apprenticeship. Now, normally apprenticeships don't quite work like that, being established on a more personal basis. But because of Fugaku's major hissy fit, the importance of the Uchiha clan, and the dissatisfaction that they were already feeling, they made an exception for me. There still was a level of personal selection in the matter because the Hokage couldn't straight up make anyone take me in. He could, however, put my name out there and offer to several of the tunin that were available. Kurinai was a tunin at this point. Apparently, she would probably get promoted in a year or two. At the very least, I was confident that I was getting one of the highest caliber chunin that were available instead of some random background character canon fodder tunin. The reason that Fugaku accepted a tunin as my master and the reason the village was dipping into the chunin bucket at all was because of the junin shortage in the village. Konoha worked exceedingly hard after the Kyuubi attack. Every other village had heard of the Kyuubi attack and were probably considering an invasion. Konoha had to put up a strong front after the attack in order to fool them into thinking we were stronger than we were in actuality. Every single available ninja and even some that were retired were pulled out into overtime in order to preserve Konoha's strong front. So, not only were we short on junin in general, but around half of them were required to constantly be on the field to preserve Konoha's image. That was the reason that some of us were put into the active reserve. There simply weren't enough junin to accommodate all of the genin. That being said, they probably could have at least passed the freaking son of the Uchiha clan head. Actually, they probably did it because I was at the bottom of my class. And in order to maximize the limited pool of junin, they only allowed the better students get junin sensei. Well, in any case, I got a sensei. I never did realize this before, but I'm a very antisocial child. It's not really my fault. Fugaku and Itachi are always too busy to socialize with. Not that I'd want to, even if they were available. And Makoto was always just a pain in the with the concerned parent, that she was giving me. The only one that I really got along with was Indra. And he was stunted too from years of neglect. So, he wasn't really helping my social situation. That was probably why he put up with my clunky interaction because he had no one else. Anyways, I have to learn how to smile and laugh and be a normal human in general in preparation for the interaction that I'll have to do in the field and with my sensei to be, which is I'm currently staked out on one of the busier streets in the village, cloaked under a light genjutsu, and observing random people and their interactions with my sharing. When I get home, I'll have to practice my smile in the mirror. When I tried to do so beforehand, the only thing that appeared on my face was this creepy ass lip movement. I decided that having that unnerving expression on my face was not exactly conducive to social interaction. So, I'd have to practice the smile. That was why I was observing the people in the street. I would later put together the things I liked the most about every smile I observed and throw it onto my face. I would practice a laugh as well, but I'm afraid that the noise it'll make when practicing will alarm the others in the clan compound. I'll have to take a pass on the laugh. The other aspects of interaction are just conversation, which I'm reasonably good at. I think that was enough creepy watching for one day. I began to head home to practice my smile. So, let's get to know each other. How about the usual likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams? Kerr and I started off the conversation. I gave her my widest, cheesiest, and hopefully most charismatic smile. I had practiced several different ones yesterday. This one was for when I wanted to impress. The others included little ones that I would keep on whenever I was supposed to be in a good mood, ones that were slightly strained to s. How people that I was irritated, and a couple variations of my others so that my expressions had less uniformity. My name is Uchiha. I like dango and really sweets in general. I dislike it when B-bonds snap. My hobbies are training, reading, and playing with my brother. My dream is to become a great ninja of the leaf. I had rehearsed this last night, putting together something that was both believable and not very alarming, putting in inflections when needed. Her and I also introduced herself, but I hardly listened. I was more interested in her body language. I had, when I was researching human behavior yesterday, read many things about body language and how it could relay how a person was really feeling. Karani had a sort of stance that suggested that she was both slightly nervous and excited. Slightly nervous probably because this is her first teaching experience, and also the fact that her first student is the son of the Uchiha Clan head. Excited probably because training anyone with the sharing is always the dream. It's much easier on the teacher when the student can just memorize anything you show them. We started with a demonstration of what I could do. A simple sparring match went underway. I started off by using a genjutsu on her, something minor, a genjutsu that made it appear as though I was slightly more to the left than I was in actuality. It was nothing that would make her suspicious and nothing that would win the fight alone. I preferred the more subtle route with genjutsu, slowly layering them on top of each other. A little something that would see things slightly slower than they actually were, another to make things seem slightly closer together. A dozen genjutsu were layered on top of each other throughout the fight, slowly desynchronizing the target from reality until they were weak enough to beat easily. I dashed at her and threw a small punch at her right hip. Besides maybe dealing enough damage to make her slightly favor the left side more than she already was from the genjutsu that I had cast, the punch also served as a point of contact with which to cast another genjutsu. I hadn't ever used so many genjutsu in spars before, but since I was being apprenticed to up-and-coming genjutsu master, I might as well show her what I can do with the illusions. Hopefully, she'll be impressed by my application. Although, from the way that things are looking, I might not even need her help. I was winning the fight easily. She had been on the defensive since the beginning and was beginning to slow down from both fatigue and the few genjutsu that I had cast on her. I reached out to unseal a few sunbi from my storage seal bandages. With a small bit of smoke, they appeared in my hand. I threw a small barrage of the sunburn at Karani, which she dodged by pivoting to the left, as I had predicted. The genjutsu I had cast on her were designed to make her favor her left side, making it easier to predict which direction that she would dodge. By the time she had entirely reoriented herself, a shuriken was already flying her way. Karani's eyes widened as the shuriken buried itself in her left thigh and she sunk to the ground. I was kind of expecting more from a supposed high-tier chunin. A slightly below average genin managed to take her out. Albeit, I wasn't really below average in terms of combat ability. It's just that the academy exams hadn't allowed me to bring out everything that I had. But still, a fresh genin shouldn't be able to beat a top-notch tunin. I unsealed a kanai and held it in a reverse grip, planning to end the fight. I walked towards her and shoved the blade of the kanai against her throat. "You lose," I announced. She simply smiled in response. "What do you mean?" And the world twisted. "You lose the hell." I was bound against a trunk of a tree with all of my storage seal bandages laying on the ground far out of my reach. Karani was standing exactly where she had been at the beginning of the fight, smiling lightly at me. "You know, that would have been pretty impressive had it been real. Your genjutsu usage is probably the most sophisticated I've ever seen in a genin. Most people, even chunin and junin, go for the big impressive genjutsu rather than the small stuff." I grunted back in the standard grouchy way. Kuren's face fell slightly. Had I been any less observant, I would have missed it. It was just a tiny motion. She herself had probably not noticed it. But I did, right? First teaching experience and she's just a tunin. Student acknowledgement is important as a teacher. Grunting is not a very encouraging response from a student. So what went wrong? I asked her better. Her expression brightened up minutely. "I cast the genjutsu at the very beginning of the spar. You need to be more aware of your surroundings. If you hadn't underestimated me and activated your sharing at all, you would have realized you were under an illusion." I narrowed my eyes. She was right. I had underestimated her. Why didn't I use my sharing at all during the fight? That's just strange. I was always taught by the various Uchiha tutors to activate your sharing in battle against someone of superior strength. I knew she was a chunin with the potential to become a junin, so why hadn't I? Or, you genjutsu'd me into not using the sharing, didn't you? Or, I was wondering if you'd catch that. I did, Kerr and I continued on, happy that she could finally start teaching. Tiny adjustments in the senses aren't the only way to throw an enemy off balance. Slight suggestions in their thoughts also work well to gain an advantage during a fight. Make them underestimate you. Make them refuse to pull out the best stuff because you're not worthy. Interesting. You're playing on the natural things that people think. Ninja generally only pull out the best judo towards the end of a fight if they're struggling rather than using trump cards in the beginning to end fights quickly. You're playing on that idea. Of course, it's quite a bit easier to make people think things if they're already thinking along the same lines. I suppose Karani will be a worthwhile sensei after all. Karani disapproved of my bandage storage seal system. She said that it limited my draw speed, which in hindsight was true. The only reason I hadn't noticed it was because I normally don't spar with people with weapons. Most of my spars have been with pure taijutsu, so I had to modify the system. The impracticality of the system was due to the fact that I had to reach for my weapons. Even though I knew the location of the seal for every one of my weapons by memory, it still cut down on the draw time for them. The slower draw speed could prove to be fatal in the long run, so I modified it. I bought a pair of fingerless gloves with sealing scrolls in the palms. Those seals held the main 3 weapons that I would be using: shuriken, kana, and espen. With the gloves, I could draw my main weapons at a nearly instantaneous rate. I ended up keeping the bandages, keeping some of the larger weapons like swords in there, as well as having backup stocks of the 3 mains that I kept in the gloves. Kurini also suggested that I start learning about poisons. With the subtle and generally not very lethal nature of genjutsu, it would be useful to have an effective non-chakra way of taking enemies out from a distance. While I could do the same thing with a kanai or a shuriken to the throat, a poison espen would do the job with less mess. Additionally, poison would be useful for assassinations and whatnot. It was just an all-around good skill to have. With the use of poison sunburn, I had to also have some medical knowledge, both to discern the most effective places to throw sanbon into and to just make them. I figured that I'd tackle the medical side of things by applying for a part-time apprenticeship at the hospital. I'd work there on the days which Karani wasn't training me. Normally, the hospital didn't allow part-time apprentices, preferring dedicated full-time workers. However, in my case, the hospital was ecstatic to have an Uchiha. Really, they were ecstatic to have any working dojutsu. Both the Byakugan and the Sharingan were absolutely amazing for medics. The Byakugan being able to see through the body and figure out what was wrong without even using a diagnostic jutsu. And the Sharingan being able to carry out extremely exact medical procedures, as well as being able to learn all of the medical judo quickly. The thing is, both the Hyuga and the Uchiha clan dismissed the idea of their clansmen becoming lowly Irian nin, encouraging them to take part in the flashy bat side of things. As such, even with my nature as a part-timer, they accepted me, and they were thrilled to have me there. I had been given a rough medical education. With my sharing, I had easily memorized all of the medical journals pertaining to anatomy. The Irian nin had also given me a demonstration of various medical jutsu like the mystic palm and the chakra scalpels. My chakra control wasn't high enough to actually use most of them, but I managed a rudimentary mystic palm to heal minor cuts, but I had trouble matching the chakra together for more severe wounds. And then came the other training. Under Karani, my genjutsu progressed from the rudimentary, mostly self-taught things that they had been before to elaborate and significantly more believable illusions. Layering genjutsu on top of each other, I learned, was actually a difficult process. I had achieved the layering part of things only because I hadn't been layering very many on top of each other, perhaps 4 at the most, and my genjutsu were very basic. For more complicated illusions, with more layers, the chakra would run into and interfere with one another. As a pleasant side effect of practicing so much genjutsu, my chakra control skyrocketed. Within a few weeks of training with Kurenai, I was able to use over half of the jutsu that I memorized. From the Uchiha library, the ones that I got but couldn't use. That is, I probably wouldn't use any of them anyways. When I was in the library, I mostly grabbed stuff that looked cool rather than stuff that was actually useful. I'll have to change my orders to the servants and have them bring me actually practical stuff. Indra's been improving rapidly. He wasn't at my level quite yet. The mangeku that I had since birth, in addition to my training with Kurenai, making me far superior in combat. We were currently locked in a spar. He threw a punch. I recognized this one from the Uchiha style. Here's the problem with using the same techniques as your enemy. They already know how to counter it. This was a basic punch from the Uchiha style. Even without the sharing active, I knew exactly where his fist would go. Grasping it in my hand, I twisted it in an awkward angle. If I really wanted to, I could have pulled the arm clean out of its socket, but this was a friendly spar intended for training. I only twisted it enough to make him feel some discomfort and to throw him off balance. He tried to get his bearings back, but I wouldn't let him recover, assaulting him with rapid-fire punches. Indra surprised me, though, and did a spin on the ground. I jumped over his spinning legs, which made me stop my barrage of punches, allowing him to recover somewhat. Indra got back up and took a ready pose. A slight warmth flared in my right hand. Hold on, Sasuke. I held up a finger and checked my hand. I had installed a sort of watch seal on the glove on my right hand. It was a rudimentary timekeeping system, not really a watch. The seal drew on a tiny amount of my chakra. Every 15 minutes, it would discharge the chakra as heat and draw more chakra from me. In such a manner, I can more or less keep track of time. This was a temporary measure until I could figure out a better system. For whatever reason, I couldn't find a watch in the marketplace. Anyways, I had been counting the heat surges from the seal, and it was about time for me to go to the hospital. I'm going to have to leave now, Sasaki. Make sure to keep training. You're getting better. Keep at it. Indra smiled brightly and nodded. Yes, Oni-sama. What an adorable weapon. You think you're up for a C rank mission? I raised an eyebrow at Karai while running. Today's main exercise involved running laps along a side of a cliff using the Triu walking jutsu while at the same time casting genjutsu. When I wasn't running D ranks, I was doing this sort of training with Karani. Probably, I replied, probably. There's always a chance things will go wrong, and my auditory genjutsu aren't quite up to par yet. C ranks weren't supposed to have combat with enemy ninja. So, it wasn't entirely imperative that I refine all of my genjutsu. But as the Land of Waves mission in canon demonstrated, things didn't always go as planned. I wouldn't worry about those. You're probably more than combat ready. If you say so. Let's go to the mission office. Then we'll see if there are any good C ranks left. I hopped off the cliff and put chakra into my feet. When I hit the ground, I pushed the chakra that was focused in my feet into the slight noise that I purposely made. I can normally hit the ground nearly silently as most ninja can, but I was purposely using the sound as a vessel for an auditory genjutsu. Nice try, but your chakra dissipated before it even reached me. I deflated slightly and jogged slightly to catch up with her. She looked backwards and smirked at me. Race you there. The second I heard her, I activated my sharing. Pride dictated that I at least try to win this. After the genin exam, I had practiced with the shunshin to the point that I could sort of use it effectively without my sharing. Sort of very much being the operative word in that sentence. Traveling places without the sharing was okay. It wasn't perfect by any means. I tended to overshoot or undershoot quite a bit, but it was functional more or less. It was actually using it in combat that was the issue. As without the Sharingan, I still, even after all my new training, couldn't use it. I'll figure it out later. With the Sharingan, I saw her shoot off in a shunshin. I brought my hands up into a hand seal and began my own shinin. With the sharing active, I could see myself and Kurenai flying through the village. With Kurenai's greater experience, chakra control, and overall skill, there really was no contest. She shot off ahead of me in a significantly faster shun. My only consolation prize was that I could see her while she was just making a blind jump. As I saw myself drawing near to the mission office, I deactivated my sharing. There was no reason to let her know that I needed crutches to perform the shunshin accurately. With the sharing deactivated, the rest of the distance passed by in a blur, and then I was standing there in front of the Missy On's office. Kerr and I didn't say anything, but she silently basked in her glory. Come on, lady. You beat a newly graduated genin that you were just training. Don't be so damn smug. Okay. Not going to lie, if I get genin someday, I'd probably do the same thing. Well, if I didn't murder them for being annoying little kids, that is. We walked into the mission office. The desk chunin handed us several mission scrolls to look over. So, What do you think, Huki? Bandits. I think bandit clearing missions were easily the most straightforward and easy. They basically boiling down to get in, kill everything, leave, as opposed to the escort type missions where you had to travel for days at a slow-ass civilian pace to reach the destination. Kerr and I looked a little surprised. Are you sure? Most genin don't get the bandit missions. It makes sense, I guess. The escort missions have a relatively low rate of killing. Even though the risk of being ambushed by bandits is the reason the client wanted a ninja escort in the first place, the chance of an ambush was rather low. As such, escort missions were good starting missions for fresh genin that hadn't gotten their hands dirty yet. But I wasn't afraid of killing now, was I? I'll take the faster and more convenient mission over the boring as hell escorts. Yeah, it's good. Well, if you're sure. Her and I still didn't look entirely assured, but at my insistence, she took the scroll anyways. Meet me tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock at the village gates, she declared after taking another deeper look at the mission scroll. Yes, Kerr and I sensei. Kerr and I made it to the bandit camp around sunset. Without any pesky civilians to slow us down, we were able to travel at shinobi speeds and make significantly better time than in an escort. We both crouched down on a tree branch and observed the bandit camp cloaked in the elongating shadows made by the setting sun. So strategy? Kurini asked me. I looked at her surprised. I thought that it was your job to come up with a plan. Kerr and I only shrugged in response. You can just do the thing solo and I'll step in if you're doing poorly. I looked at her for a second just to make sure that she wasn't joking or something. This was her and I, right? The same one that was slightly concerned that I chose the murdery mission over the escort one. Her and I remained silent, so I guess I was on my own for this one. First mission, 2. She either has a lot of faith in me or she wants me to fail to discourage me from taking murdery missions in the future. Probably that second one. Actually, there was no way a genin, unless they were on par with Itachi or Kakashi, which I was not, could take out a bandit camp alone, especially one as large as this one. This was the sort of bandit mission that a team of chunin would normally undertake. There was no way Karani thought I could do it. There was no way a normal genin could do it, unless they were smart and subtle about it. I couldn't just rush in there and pop a couple jutsu and fry them all. That would be stupid. And against nearly 100 bandits, potentially suicidal. So, planning time. Well, if I could genjutsu a couple of them into thinking that a party would be a great idea, then it would be an easy victory. After they all pass out drunk, I just waltz in and murder them. The problem is though, they didn't have any alcohol. Really, or at least I haven't seen any. I've yet to actually scout the camp itself, so I'm not quite certain, but I'm pretty sure they don't have any, at least from what I've seen. I threw in a small suggestion on one of the bandits. Just a tiny little whisper. You should go have a drink right now. It wasn't anything big. I learned from Karana that you should always go with the small suggestions that appear in the back of their heads. The guy the first targeted though didn't do anything special, suggesting either that he didn't like alcohol, unlikely, he's a bandit after all, didn't have access to alcohol, maybe not everyone got the booze, in which case trying to induce a party would be pointless, or the camp straight up didn't have a hole. In any case, that idea was out. I think I've got it now. Yeah, this will work. I activated my sharing and observed one of the bandits. My chakra capacity and control had improved massively since getting a sensei, so I wasn't afraid of using a bit of my chakra on the sharing. I watched my chosen bandit memorizing his gait and his other mannerisms, enhancing my hearing with a handy-dandy jutsu that Kernai had taught me a week or two ago. I could eavesdrop on their conversations and figure out how he talked and interacted with other bandits. His name was Isaac. Once I felt confident that I knew how to act like the guy well enough, I waited for him to get alone. It took a long hour of waiting in order for him to get sufficiently isolated. He eventually was put on guard duty with one other guy. I can deal with one other guy. Silently, I crept up to the two unsuspecting bandits. I placed a genjutsu on the other guard, one that would make him see everything exactly as it was at the moment. He would see nothing when I quietly dragged Isaac's corpse away into the forest. A stab of fast-acting poison administered through a sunbeam was all it took to bring Isaac down. My first kill, I felt nothing at all. I performed the henge and assumed the role of Isaac. I removed the genjutsu from the other guard and stood in the same place as Isaac had been. After nearly an hour of solemnly watching the forest later, Isaac's guard shift finally came to an end, and another set of bandits came to take our place. I recognized one of them. He was friends with Isaac. I greeted him in the same way I had seen Isazuke greet him before. "Hey man," I growled out the words in a raspy voice, imitating Isaac. The other bandit nodded in response. While I had eye contact with him, I planted a tiny genjutsu. Just a tiny voice. "Traitor. He's a traitor. Kill him before he kills everyone." While that seems like a dramatic genjutsu, I put it in the back of the guy's mind. Just a tiny suggestion. It was only an idle thought. As I walked through the bandit camp, limping slightly because Isazuke had tripped a few days ago, I implanted the very same genjutsu on all of the bandits that I came across. There were a surprising number of them out and about. I was under the impression that without electricity, they would have nothing better to do than sleep when the sun went down. Apparently, I was wrong. It was a good thing they were active anyways. I could genjutsu more of them. "Hey Isaac, how's the leg?" A large man missing several teeth jeered at me. Many of the bandits had made fun of Isazuke for tripping the other day. This was just another bandit come to rub salt in Isaac's wounds. "Piss off." I waved him off like Isazuke normally did. Hey, no need to be so rude. I'm just being considerate." "Hey." I looked the man right in the eyes and planted a genjutsu in him. He, from what I saw earlier, didn't exactly like Isaac. I planted the same traitorous suggestion in the back of his head, but cast another as well. This genjutsu would play on his natural dislike of Isaac, making him find more reasons to dislike him. "Piss off, Daishi," I shoved him, usually a meaningless gesture, but in Daishi's mind, it was almost a declaration of war. "Oh. You want to go, Isaac?" Daishi shoved me back harder. I stumbled backwards a few steps. Tension in the bandit camp began to rise as Daishi and Isazuke become more angry. The insidious suggestions that I had planted earlier began to not look so unfounded, and they grew more nervous that a betrayal was about to happen. "Perfect. Yeah. I want to go." I pulled out a kanai and waved around threateningly. "Come on. No balls." Daishi hesitated. Even though he had insulted and challenged Isaac, he had not been expecting this. He hadn't been expecting to fight for real. Here was the moment where everything came together. Here was where all of my work came into fruition. Daishi pulled a kanai of his own out and charged me, screaming. The genjutsu I had placed on him earlier only served to fuel his charge. I waited for him to approach. Just at the last second, I kouramied with Isaac's corpse. I had left his body in the forest and knew exactly where it was. I made sure that the kawari was smokeless, so the transition went smoother. It still wasn't exactly perfect, but all of the bandits were nervous, so in the heat of the moment, a bit of choppiness was ignored. Daishi's kanai slid into Isaac's chest, and the corpse flopped lifelessly onto the ground. Daishi's attack wouldn't have been fatal had Isaac still been alive, but since I had pre-killed him, it wasn't even relevant. Daishi sat straddled Isaac's waist and began to mutilate the corpse, shredding it with his kanai. He grinned at his victory. I had climbed onto another tree branch and was watching the spectacle. Eyes glinting in anticipation, I removed the genjutsu from Daishi. Daishi's eyes lost their bloodlust and he took another look at what he was doing. Gee. Guys, I didn't mean it, guys. It was just a dear Kami. Look at what he's done. I smirked as the effects of my genjutsu began to become more noticeable. The bandits shouted at one another, then suddenly erupted into a chaotic battle, each throwing accusations at one another. Every single bandit had their weapons drawn, fighting it out with people they had just joked with only minutes before. It was every man for themselves. It was delicious. Why kill them when I could make them kill themselves? I'll just mop up whoever's left. A figure ran out from one of the bandits. Tense enough the leader then by the time he showed up the bandits' numbers had dropped to a mere 30 or so already less and half of what they had before. Even though he had called out, none of the bandits had stopped fighting. The leader snarled and began to make hand seals. He shouted something and tossed his head backwards. A plume of fire shot from his mouth. That got both the bandits' attention and mine. The bandits snapped out of their genjutsu. Well, they didn't exactly snap out of it. They were still under its effects, But with the heat of battle taken away, the tiny suggestion that I had implanted wasn't as effect. Anymore. More importantly, there was a ninja on this mission. Goddamn it, C ranks. Things can never be easy with you. What the hell is going on? The bandit leader shouted. All of the bandits spoke at once, producing a loud, meaningless babble. Silence. They shut up one at a time, you morons. Okay, this is unexpected. I have to plan around this, I guess. Judging by the way he was willing to just throw away a jutsu, his guy, the bandit leader, probably had a larger than average chakra capacity. He also probably wasn't the most intelligent or pragmatic person. If I had to guess, just from the one jutsu and the fact that he was the leader of a relatively large local bandit group, I'd place him at high gen or low tunin level. Well, if you judged him from his straight combat ability, that didn't factor in jutsu or various tactics that could be deployed. I was confident that with my superior planning in genjutsu, I could take him out. Let's see. There are about 30 bandits left. Should I could do them the way that most shinobi did, directly engaging them. It seemed like a terrible idea, though. I was heavily outnumbered, and there was an unknown in the bandit leader. There weren't many other options though. Using genjutsu wouldn't work. I can't place them without eye or skin contact as my auditory genjutsu wasn't good enough yet. I'll engage them and try to be smart about it. Karani will probably act as my safety net should I fail. I drew 2 kanai. One of them had a standard explosive tag attached. The other had a lower grade one. I threw the one with the standard explosive tag into the middle of the crowd of bandits. It detonated with a large explosion and took out a good portion of the remaining bandits. 17 left. They spotted me now. They had seen where the kanai had been thrown from. The bandits began to throw kanai and shuriken in my direction. I activated my sharing and brought my hands up for the shunshin hand seals. Weaving myself around the shards of metal they had thrown at me, I flew at them at a ridiculous speed. I reached the halfway point between us, an area clear of metal. I made the hand seals for the grand fireball jutsu. Fire chakra poured out of my mouth and I spat out a fireball. The orb of flames crashed into the ground, emulating several bandits and setting part of the camp on fire. 9 left, still in the air. I made the seals for another shunshin and shot towards my next victims. Exiting the shunshin just a half meter away from a bandit, I drew a number of poison-coated espen. With a quick movement of my hands, they were launched in a small barrage of metal sticks. 5 left. I shut off my sharing. I might need the chakra later, so it's best not to use too much of it. I drew a simple straight sword, a chakudo. I wouldn't be able to shunshin with an weapon in my hand as I couldn't make hand seals. I had been dealing with the problem by drawing small throwing weapons and throwing them away when I needed to make hand seals. With a sword, I had increased melee range, but no longer had access to hand seals, which could prove to be problematic. It shouldn't be a problem right now, though. With so little bandits left, I didn't even need jutsu. Why did I even bother with a sword in the first place? My kanai, shuriken, and sunban just dropped into my hands whenever I wanted them to, so my draw time with them was significantly better than with my sword, and the weapons could be thrown, so they had a much higher range than the sword. Why did I even bother? Whatever. I ran at one of the last bandits. I brandished my sword and Shink stuck it through his throat. 4 left. My sword whipped around and in a flash of steel cleaved through a man's neck, separating their head from their body. 3 left. I stabbed the chudo through a bandit's chest. They gurgled, blood likely filling their throat, but were still alive. I grabbed the man's shirt and spun around. I held his limp body in front of me, listening to the thump, thump thump sound of kana and shuriken hitting his back. I used him as a meat shield. I dumped his body on the ground and faced the bandit that had thrown the weapons. I threw my sword at him. Despite the impracticality and general ridiculousness of such a move, the sword struck true and punctured his abdomen. He fell on his knees, then to the ground. I'll retrieve my sword after I kill the rest of them. Actually, how many am I at right now? I was at 3, and I just killed 2. So, 3 minus 1 left. Where's the last guy? I activated my sharing, and my eyes span wildly in their sockets as they searched for the final bandit. There, under the ground, there was a disturbance of chakra. He was using the hiding like a mole jutsu to try to sneak up on me. I watched him swim under the ground and saw when his chakra began to come near the surface. He was exiting the ground. I jumped backwards just in time to avoid an explosion of earth as the bandit leader jumped out from the ground. I got a better look at him. He had brown hair and wore a pair of brown shorts with a matching brown pair of sandals. He wore no shirt. How fashionable. The bandit leader glared at me and I stared back. Through the eye contact, I placed a genjutsu, one that would make him see all of my attacks slightly faster than they actually were, making him block just a bit too early. With a scream, he took off and charged at me. I dodged his charge by darting to the left. My fingers just barely brushed his side as I avoided him, and through the contact point, I put another genjutsu on him. He swung his fist around with a surprising amount of speed. He was faster than I was expecting given his bulky frame. I caught off guard by the punch, was hit backwards, and flew through the air. I landed on the ground several meters away. I got back up as quickly as I could and activated my sharing. I'd have to take him more seriously. I drew several poison and threw a small barrage of them at the bandit leader. He dodged to the side, again, demonstrating his surprising speed. I ran right at him, drawing shuriken as I ran, throwing them in parabolic arcs. He span around the shuriken, dodging them. I drew a kanai and threw it. I was only 2 meters away from him now, so it was much harder for him to dodge. He managed to, but just barely. As I closed in on him, he began to make attacks of his own. His punches, the speed of which had surprised me before, no longer fazed me with my sharing. I saw them coming well before they were executed. It was trivial to avoid them now. Ducking under his strikes, I punched quickly, using the contact points to put more genjutsu on him. As the fight drew on, he would grow gradually more disorientated as I placed more genjutsu on him, and he wouldn't even notice. All I had to do was make sure none of my genjutsu were too drastic and to stay alive. He began to back away from me while making hand seals. I could recognize the sequence of hand seals. They were for a flamethrower jutsu. The weakness of that particular jutsu was its short range. I backed away as well, and the fire that suddenly erupted from the bandit leader's mouth hit no one. The fire did serve to light more of the bandit camp on fire. Though a few of the buildings were on fire from my grand fireball, it had spread throughout the fight. The flamethrower jutsu only lit more ablaze. I made the hand seals for the shinin and with the mangeku appeared instantly behind him. I drew 2 of my kanai, but the tiny poof noise of the kani coming out of the seal alerted him to my presence and he ducked quickly. The 2 kanai soaring harmlessly over his head. I made the hand seals for the shunshin once more, appearing quite a ways up in the air. I drew a kani, this one with a standard explosive tag strung onto it. I threw the kani and detonated the tag as it neared the bandit leader. I didn't need to wait for the smoke to clear to realize that he hadn't been hit by the explosion. I had watched him me away before the explosion had gone off. I saw him squatting on a tree branch that hung over the burning bandit camp. I blurred through some hand seals and disappeared in another shun. I need to end this quickly. I'm running out of time with my sharing. While I was in my shin, I watched him jump off of the tree branch. I maneuvered my way over to time and exited my shunshin with my hand extended. I held a kanai in my hand. The kanai pierced through his stomach. I glanced upwards, hoping to place another genjutsu while I was so close to him. He had a kanai of his own in his hand, and it was descending on me. There was nothing I could do. One of my hands was gripping a kanai, so I couldn't shunshin away. There was nothing that I could do to get me out of the way fast enough. I could only watch as the kanai drew closer and closer to my face in slow motion as the mangeku saw it. Wait a minute, mangeku. I have that short-range teleport, Fujin. That, doesn't need hand. Shink. And it was too late. The bandit leader pierced my right eye and I screamed in agony. I still retained the sense to use Fukien and escape the kani piercing through the rest of my eye. I disappeared and reappeared half of a meter to the left, but the damage was done. I was blind in my right eye. There was something surreal about the experience. Being so connected with your eyes makes it particularly jarring when one of them went dead. Dead. An interesting word to use. It was almost as though my eye was alive, breathing, and now dead. Deceased, destroyed, useless, insufficient. Damn it. I put my hands together for a shunshin and made a tactical retreat into the forest. The bandit leader was beyond me. I couldn't risk losing another eye. Even with only a single functioning Sharing, I could still use the Shunshin just fine. I rocketed deeper and deeper into the forest until finally my chakra began to dip into the emergency zone, and I stopped. I was quite a ways away from the bandit camp. By my own judgment, I figured I was about 2.5 kilometers away. I scanned the forest for a good spot to hide out and wait for Karani. I spotted a cozy hollow in a tree. Shutting off my Sharing, I crawled into the hollow. I took out the storage seal that contained Mother's eyes. The eyes were sealed in a tube of thick preservative fluid. Since I had waited for a while to get the fluid, they had rotted somewhat. I would have to zone them back into working order, but I only had one working eye. I would have to use the Izanagi then to the entire surgery blind. The thought terrified me. The brains of the Uchiha were hardwired for the Sharing for visual input. There was no way that I could do the surgery myself while blind. I would be worse than even a normal person. Oh no. The beast looked upon the avatar of Mammon. Now that won't do now, will it? The beast descended from its palace of monetary lusting and entered the mind of Mammon. The beast inspected the mind of Mammon and made tweaks. The beast fed the avatar skills and knowledge. Thankfully, at the hospital, I had read various books on the workings of the eyes. With my relatively good chakra control, I could construct a sort of chakra eye. The chakra eye wouldn't work nearly as well as a normal one would, but at least it was something that I could use while conducting the surgery. The chakra eyes had the pleasant side effect of being able to see slightly into my skull as it simulated optical nerves all around. It was almost as though it was entirely designed for eye implants. I took Mother's eyes out of their tube, their icky half-deed forms, disgusting me slightly. Well, here goes and I went blind just for a moment. My new Mangekyou abilities, the ones I got from Mother's eyes, were again jokes. No, I can't say that. I dismissed my original Mangekyou abilities, but if I had even considered the utility, I wouldn't have had to make the switch in the first place. My new Mangekyou abilities would require some thought in order to use them effectively in combat. Better Mother's left eye could grow a flower from a seed anywhere within visual range. Juboko. Unfortunately, because the Sharingan didn't have X-ray vision, I couldn't grow flowers inside of people's body. And wreck their organs or anything. Actually, with a combination attack, including both Damaki to render an object invisible and let me see through it, and Juboko, I maybe do that. It's a stretch, though, that's for certain. I'll have to find out what within visual range really means and test it out. Flowers may or not be useful to have on demand. Anyways, they could be good distractions at the very least. Mother's right eye could cast a genjutsu to make it seem as though an entire area was flooded. Fire. The size of the flooded area dictated the amount of chakra used. Tiny patches of water only took tiny amounts of chakra, and to flood, an entire area took an immense amount of chakra. Upon further inspection, fire might be more useful in combat than I had first thought. I could blind someone by flooding the area in front of their eyes. I could also fool water jutsu users, making them try to draw on water that didn't actually exist. I would have to get out of the habit of dismissing things that didn't have an immediately apparent application. I would also have to start incorporating both Fujin and Damaki into my fighting style, as I should have from the very beginning. Now that my eyes were eternal Mangekyou, I literally had no reason not to. I sat in the hollow that I had done the surgery in, waiting for Kerr and I to come pick me up. I had slept away the night, and with my seal watch, I figured that around 4 hours had passed since I woke up. I woke up just before sunrise, and sunrise this time of year was around 5 o'clock. So, it was around 9 o'clock and Karani still hadn't come to find me. Something was probably wrong here. Oh, yeah. Speaking of Karani, the lady I was out there with that big ass bandit leader clearly struggling, and you did Jack, __, I can kind of understand leaving me alone for that first part. You left me alone for experience or discouragement of taking dangerous assignments or whatever. But seriously, I thought you'd at least step in when I was about to die. When I find you, you'd better be on the verge of death, cause there's literally no other excuse that I'd take for you doing nothing. I pushed my way out of the hollow and into the forest, shielding my eyes from the harsh sunlight with my hand. With Sharingan, I had memorized the exact path that I had taken with the Shunshin last night. I opted for the slower method of travel, tree hopping, rather than the shunshin, to conserve my chakra in case I had to fight. I walked into the area where the bandit camp was supposed to be. The entire camp was burned to the ground. Only a few charred and destroyed structures were left of the bandit camp. I turned my Sharingan on and swept the area for chakra signatures. Nothing. The bandit leader had probably fled and Karani was nowhere to be found. Okay, this was problematic. I don't actually have very many tracking-oriented abilities other than the sharing, which could locate footprints and whatnot. There was really nothing that I could do. I guess I should add tracking jutsu onto the list of things that I need to get done when I get back to the village. I walked through the ruined camp, my eyes scanning the entire environment for a clue of where Karani or really anyone was at this point. There were several charred skeletons on the ground. I checked their structures against the ones that I remembered from the fight yesterday. Their skeletal structures matched the ones of the guys that I killed yesterday. No new confirmed dead people then. There's a tiny bit of dried blood on the ground. That could be something. My eyes span around looking for more blood. There's a whole trail of the stuff on the ground. The blood trail starting from the tiny droplets to a whole mess of blood. Frowning, I shut off the Sharingan. I didn't need it to follow the trail anymore. I followed the path that the blood drew on the ground. Lying on the ground was a body. I turned on my sharing for just a second to scan the body. It didn't match the skeletal structure of any of the bandits that I had fought yesterday. I didn't kill this one or even fight him. Following the trail, I found more and more bodies, all of them unfamiliar. From their muscle structure, I could tell that these guys had had at least some training as a shinobi. Probably academy dropouts and genin level nuke nin. Some of them even looked to be low tunin level if I were to guess. This is a really damn useful application of the sharing, being able to combine medical knowledge with it. If I had thought at all during yesterday's fight, I would have realized that the bandit leader was out of my league. Remembering the bandit leader's physique, my revised estimate for his strength level is somewhere around mid-chunin level. There were actually quite a few bandits piled up, 18 and counting. All of them were stronger than the ones that I had fought. I had gone up against the grunts. Someone else, likely Karani, had cleaned up the actually skilled bandits. There was no way that this mission was AC rank. With this many ninja level opponents, it was easily AB rank at this point. I went up against somewhere around 100 bandits alone, a staggering number for a first mission. Remembering them, a few of them probably were genin level, and one of them, the leader, was into the chunin tier. And now there were nearly 20 more bandits, all of them having ninja training. You're late. A labored sword of speech came from below me as Karani materialized from a tree root. She had disguised herself with the henge as a tree root. And without my sharing active, I hadn't caught it. Karani-sensei. Damn it. I know I said that I wouldn't accept anything but near death as an excuse for not helping me, but really her entire body was covered in scratches and bruises. A few of her bones looked to be either broken or dislocated, and it appeared as though the only thing keeping her left arm attached was a combination of hastily wrapped bandages, ninja wire, crappily repurposed for stitches and prayers. The hell happened to you? There were quite a few more bandits than the mission scroll had said. They were a lot more skilled, too. There were genin and chunin tier enemies. This should have a mission that an entire squad of chunin should have handled. I was silent as I contemplated. This was a perfect chance for me to make my getaway. Kerr and I was weakened. There was no way that she'd be able to put up a proper fight in this state. I could kill her, bathe the whole area in fire, and the village wouldn't even realize that I had run away. But did I want to? I wouldn't last a week outside the village walls. I almost died from bandits of all things. Albeit, these were stronger than the average bandits. But still, if I had learned anything from this experience, it was that I wasn't strong enough. But if I laid low in some obscure village, no, what if the village was raided by bandits of the same caliber that I had seen today? It wouldn't protect me from the infinite Tsukuyomi either. So, I'd have to make it back to the village and train my way up to a level that would allow me to survive outs. I'd Konoha. But would I have another chance? This was a perfect opportunity. If I refused to take this one, would I have another chance? How else could I escape the Uchiha massacre? Or would I even have to escape it in the first place? I'm an extra character, someone who exists outside the realm of canon. Could I change things so that the Uchiha massacre didn't happen in the first place? Shiui. He was the key. Shiui planned to use his Koto Matsukami to change the Uchiha clan's mind. The only reason that he hadn't carried through with it was because Danzo stole his eye before he could do it. Shiu's plan was unethical, involving brainwashing his entire family. If I changed events so that Shiui actually succeeded, I would forever have to shoulder the guilt of knowing that I had part in brainwashing the clan. But who the cared? I would live right and I got to enjoy the benefits of having a clan with the political and monetary support. It was decided then. I knelt to the ground and ran a diagnostic jutsu on Karani. With her injuries laid out before me, I used the medical education that I had been given to fix her up a bit. It was a patch job that was for certain, but at least she would live until we made it to the village. Just thinking about the village put a cold smirk on my face. I had caused ripples before, certainly with Ka becoming a significantly more tame kid after I brutalized him and with Indra. But this by far would be the largest ripple that I would send through the Narutoverse. Here was where I would start truly with canon. Luckily, the trip back was clear of bandits, and we made it back to Konoha without incident. Karani was still heavily injured and in no condition to fight or even to move. I had to carry her all the way. The return trip was greatly shortened, though, with my use of the shunshin. On the way to the bandit camp, I hadn't used the shunshin to save chakra. But on the way back, I didn't have to fight anyone. So I sped us along with shunshin jumps. While we were on the road, I went over the list of things that I had to do. I had to incorporate Mangekyou abilities into fighting style, proceed to train my off, run probably 1 or 2 more C ranks to gauge my progress, take the Chunin exams if there was time. Then help Shi brainwash the entire clan. I had about a year and a half to do all that before Shiui made his move. It'll be a tight fit. I walked through the gates of the village, nodding to the guard, Chunin, who gawked at us. We probably were quite a sight with Karani's heavily injured form on my back and my crappy patch job on my eyes. Really, I looked almost like Kakashi now with a scar running over my eye. Granted, it was significantly smaller than Kakashi's scar, only running 1 or 2 centimeters above and below my eye. Thanks to the genjutsu I had placed on the bandit leader and my Fujin, I had only received a small cut. I shifted Karani around on my back. The only reason that I could carry her at all was my enhanced strength that came from being a ninja. Her feet dragged on the ground behind me, which was probably rather uncomfortable for her. I made the hand seals for the shunshin. Actually, add that to the list of to do. Got to get the shunshin sealers. That'll be useful as hell. And we appeared in front of the hospital. I barged into the lobby, drawing quite a bit of attention. The receptionist immediately called for medics and within seconds, Irian Nin appeared in the lobby and carried Karani away. Alright, now that that's done, I got to go to a mission report and head back home. I'll visit Karani in a day or 2. I prepared to head to the mission office to deliver a report. When an Irian Nin called out, "Where are you going?" "To the mission office." "Absolutely not. You need medical attentio." "I don't. And even if I did, I have a perfectly capable Irian Nin back home." The Irian that Fugaku had hired for me was a private medic. And Uchiha actually and as such was loyal to the Uchiha clan rather than Konoha. Usually Uchihas were ninja out on the front lines. But there are always outliers. Because of their status as a private medic, they weren't required to report their medical procedure and their findings to the village. Normal Iro Nin weren't allowed to report Keggenka, a law passed to pacify the clans, but Fugaku was a paranoid bastard. He had explicitly told me not to use the village's Irian. I walked out the hospital, ignoring the protesting Irian. You know, this is probably the reason why most people thought the Uchiha were stuck up, __. The next day, after I had sufficiently rested, I began think of training. What's on the list of things to do? Let's start with incorporating the Mangekyou moves into my fighting style. My Mangekyou abilities, in stark contrast to the ones displayed in the series, were rather weak with low chakra usage and more subtle applications. How do I make the most of those applications with Damaki? I dismissed it in the beginning because I thought it would be ineffective as a stealth method. But I could cast Damaki and random weapons, people, and objects during a fight to throw people off. The more skilled ninja would be able to feel the air disturbance that Kanai and Shuriken generated even when they were invisible. To counter that, I would use on Sunburn, the smallest and thinnest of the weapons, thus the ones that created the least wind. I could randomly use on the ground and trees and stuff. It was always disorientating to look down and see yourself standing on nothing. I remember in my old life there was that glass bridge in China that was positively terrifying. For Fujin, the application was obvious. I should have been using it from the beginning. I could use the teleportation for little adjustments in my position. That would have saved my old eyes. For fire, the flooding genjutsu, the usage of it wasn't too obvious. It was good for distractions, maybe a bit of disorientation and/or confusion, but that was about it. Juboko, the flower-growing one, was the ability that I was by far the most excited for. I discovered after fiddling around with it for a little bit that I could make the flower grow in peculiar ways. Everything had to be more or less proportional to the normal flower. But I found that because I controlled everything about the growth of the flower could make some things grow abnormally. Such as flowers whose petals continually fell off. I would grow the flower, the petals would fall off, I would grow them back instantly, and within moments, the entire place would be filled with flower petals. But the part about that I was most excited about was the pollen. I could make the flower continually produce pollen in extreme excess. Oh. You might be laughing now, but around 20% of the population was allergic to pollen. Statistically, that means that 1 in 5 shinobi would turn into sneezing, watery messes the minute I filled the battlefield with pollen. Of course, it wouldn't be an instant win should I get at shinobi with allergies, but it would definitely help a lot. Oh. Yeah. Did I mention that pollen is flammable? Because it is very flammable, and when in large enough quantities, it was potentially explosive. 37 kilograms of pollen when burnt was roughly equal to 4 ton of TNT. I would never have to carry explosive tags ever again. Well, I would, because it's not very chakra efficient to produce that much pollen. Even though the ability normally didn't cost too much when making enough pollen that it weighed as much as I did, it started to put a strain on both my eyes and my chakra reserves. Even outside of pollen, there were a multitude of ways that I could use Juboko could be used. If I got my hands on the seeds of the poisonous flowers, I would never have to pay for poisons ever again. Really, any flower with medicinal properties, I could grow. Of course, to use Juboko to its fullest potential, I would have to carry seeds everywhere and also be able to identify various flowers and their uses, which is why I was heading to the Yamanaka flower shop. Here's a fact that wasn't shown in the TV program. The Yamanaka flower shop sold the dangerous variety of plants, too. Oh. They did it in the back outside the eye of the civilian shoppers, and you had to give them your shinobi ID for them to let you through. A fact that most people forgot about the friendly flower shop owners was that they were a ninja clan. A ninja clan that provided ninja services. Normally, clients didn't actually buy the poisonous flowers themselves, instead preferring to purchase the prepared poisons that were already extracted from the flowers. There were some specialty clients, though, who had their own special mixes of poisons and their own methods of preparing the poisons. They were the ones that actually bought the flowers. I walked into the shop. The smell of flowers hitting me right away. I walked to the counter where Ino was busy arranging flowers. She was so engrossed in her task that she didn't even notice me approach. Excuse me. Ino jumped, her fingers knocking around the flowers, messing with their arrangement. The hell, who even? Ino looked up and saw me. Whatever she was about to say died in her throat and her eyes clouded with nervousness. She was there for the day that I beat up Car, right? She probably thinks that I'm a monster or something. Well, she's not wrong necessarily. Whatever. I run through the smiles that I have stored from that one time I creepily watched people. Let's go with small polite smile number 3. That one will probably work. Hello, I'm looking make my purchases in the back. I held up my ID for her to see. It looked as though my smile had marginally calmed her down. Oh. Of course. Right this. Marginally. Very marginally. Damn it. I need to work on my social interaction skills. I ended up buying a flower manual along with my flowers. I figured that I'd need it for figuring out which flower was which. It was a useful skill to have anyways. I could have just used my sharing and memorized the whole manual instead of actually paying for it, but I felt that would come across as a rude gesture if not thievery. I had the money for it anyways, or rather the clan had the money for it. I also bought a bunch normal flowers in seed packets, both for some variation and because I figured that I could go give them to Karina when I visited her in the hospital. The minute I got home, I went to one of the Uchiha training grounds. There, I ripped open a seed packet and shook out a single seed. Which flower is this? I read the label on the seed packet. Moondust Carnation. Yeah, maybe I should have read the flower manual first. I activated my Sharingan and sped through the manual. The thing described the flowers themselves, providing drawings, their anatomies, uses, and how to take care of them. I didn't really need that last one, as I never really had to take care of my flowers. Why bother to water them when you could use your magical eyeball instead? Lit. Moondust Carnation. Here we go. I activated my sharing. My eyes spin into the pinwheels of the Mangekyou, and I focused on the seed. Juboko. It was kind of surreal how the flower grew. The plant sprang up at an alarming speed, immediately blooming into a large purple flower. I shook a couple more seeds out of the packet into my hand. I tossed the seeds into the air and glared at them with my mango, watching as they filled the air with large purple flowers. I can work with this. I walked into the hospital carrying a bouquet of flowers that I had grown myself with Juboko. I was rather proud of myself. I went through the non-poisonous flowers that I had, selecting the ones that I thought looked rather nice. I ended up putting together a pretty nice-looking bouquet. At least I thought it looked pretty nice. The colors went well together, I think. I walked up to the receptionist and put on charming smile number 2. Hello, I'm visiting Yuhi Karani. The receptionist glanced up at me, name and reason for visit, I'm Uchiha, and Yui is my sensei. The receptionist shuffled through some files. After just a few seconds of looking, she glanced up. Clear, she's in room 204B. Lit. Then, there was a helpful little map of the hospital posted on the wall for visitors. I activated my Sharingan and scanned the map for 204B. Finding it not even a tenth of a second later, I stuffed the bouquet of flowers into one of the storage seals on my bandages. With my hands free, I made the hand seals for the shunshin. I whizzed through the hospital, arriving at the door to Karani's room. With a puff of smoke, I unsealed my flowers. I knocked on the door and Nin opened the door for blinking when she saw me. She smiled and waved me in. Come in, come in. Karani's voice, sounding significantly better than it did a day or two ago, rang out. Who is it? I walked into the room waving at her. She blinked. Huey, the one and only. She blinked a few more times as if to make sure that I was really there. Surprised, I asked if I'm to be entirely honest. Yeah, I didn't think you were the type of person to visit. Well, normally I wouldn't. There are better things that I could be doing, but fostering relations is never a bad thing. I could always use connections, and it was best to have a good relationship with the one responsible for most of your training. Well, here I am, I shrugged. I brought flowers. Karani seemed even more surprised, her expression bordering on shock. Really now? Yes. What of it? She shook her head. No, nothing. Okay. I handed her the bouquet and she took the flowers gently. She looked at the flowers and her eyes widened. She just stared at them in open shock for a few seconds. Then she burst out laughing. What? Kerr and I just kept laughing, taking loud, gasping breaths between convulsions. What? I repeated. Finally, Kerr and I calmed down enough to make coherent sentences. You never studied flower arrangements in the academy, huh? No. Allow me to educate you a bit. She pointed a dark red flower. This one symbolizes hatred. No, really. She pointed at another. This one symbolizes nightmares and fear. Really. This one symbolizes pain. This one represents anger. And this one anguish. The white one over there is a symbol of regret. And this one over here symbolizes the loss of will to push on in the face of cosmic nihilism. Okay. The first ones I could kind of believe, but really that last one. Really, she was just screwing with me now. You're totally screwing with me. You want to bet on that? Quote. No. I admit defeat. How the hell did I pick out such terrible flowers? I just put in the ones that I thought looked nice. Man, now I got to go back to the Yamanaka flower shop to pick up a book on flower arranging and stuff. What do you know? That one flower actually did represent the loss of will to push on in the face of cosmic nihilism. This raises quite a few questions. Anyways, What do I have left to integrate into my fighting style before I start throwing myself into repetitive training? Well, there's still the Susanoo, which I haven't touched yet. I haven't really messed around with it because my chakra reserves were nowhere near the amount necessary to form any stage of the Susanoo. Now, however, I'm confident that I'll be able to manifest the rib cage at the very least. My sharing activated the 3 Tomo designs spinning into the black pin wheels of the Mangu. Susanoo. Ah. Jesus, that hurt. An ethereal collection of ribs backed by a section of spin formed a protective shield around me. Blazing chakra filled in the air around the bones. My Susanoo was really the rib cage was a pastel pink color. That's just the rib cage, right? The thing will darken when I manifest more of it, right? I'm hoping for a nice scary red Susanoo. I dismissed my Susanoo. That thing, even though I had only manifested the first stage, the most basic Susanoo, had sucked away quite a bit of chakra. Around 1/10 of my entire reserves, and I hadn't even kept the thing active for 10 seconds. The thing hurt like nothing else, too. Obviously, I would have to work on it. Maybe later. There are more pressing things to train with. Before I even began training, I saw a flash of chakra out of the corner of my eye. I still had my Mangekyou on and my eye flickered over. It was Shiui coming out of a shunshin. Perfect. I was meaning to talk to him eventually. Anyways, my apologies, Huki-san. I just noticed a rather large chalker. I put on polite smile number 4. Don't lie to me, Shui. Quote. ... I'm sorry. You saw. You knew. Don't pretend like you didn't know what was happening. Huey-san, you saw it, didn't you? That's what caught your attention. I'm not certain I know what you're referring. The Susanoo. Shui. The Susanoo. Shiu reacted only slightly to the mention of the Susanoo. I wouldn't have caught his slight expression of surprise had my Mangekyou not been active. Ah. So you did know. You're one of the few people in this clan that can manifest it. After all, it would only make sense that sensing another would catch your attention. Ah. My apologies, Hukian. I didn't mean save your breath, Shiui. There are more important things we should be discussing. Shiui was silent. The Koto Matsukami Shiui, Yushu's sharing activated, and he immediately blurred into action. His shunshin was perfect. He certainly deserved his title as Shui of the shunshin. It was seamless and faster than anything I've ever seen, and it was mine now. I still had my sharing active. I do believe that mastering the shin was on my list of things to do. I can check that one off the list. Shui held the tip of his sword at my throat. I noticed that there were multiple Shuis, all of which were also pointing their swords at me. How did you find out? Put that sword down, Shiui. We both know that you won't kill me. It's not in your nature. And don't you dare use that damn genjutsu on me. There are more important things you should be using it for. Shiui narrowed his eyes and sheathed his sword. He looked at me expectantly. We have a clan to save. Shiu was instantly more alert than he was before, if that was even possible. He was already rather on edge. The coup is very much an issue. Only you can put an end to the bubbling discontent from the Uchiha. Shiui stared at me. I could see a tiny bit of chakra shoot out from the forest and touch him. He turned to the direction that the chakra came from. A message probably. He spoke up. I have to leave. We will continue this discussion at a later date. Signal me with your Susanoo when you are available once more. If I am in the village, I will come. I favored him with a shallow nod, of course. For the clan and the village. For the village and the clan, he agreed. He shunted away. There was a start. Things were in motion now. And this one means happiness. And this one means quick recovery. And this one means friendship. I showed off my new flower bouquet to Karani, having put together a better one after reading up on the symbolism of flowers. Well, better is a subjective term. I still think that my first bouquet, the one with all the flowers with depressing symbolisms, looked way cooler than this one. But since flower arrangements and symbolisms were picky, weird, and strangely specific, the arrangement I made this time looked to be of a rather poor aesthetic. Maybe I'll just buy a pre-made bouquet instead of being cheap and trying to make my own. I didn't think you'd actually read up on flower symbolisms. Color me impressed. I'm full of surprises. Karani considered me for a moment. Of course you are. My seal watch flared. That meant that it was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Time to go train. I stood up and waved goodbye to Kerr and I. See you tomorrow. I headed to the training grounds. Just because my sensei was currently in the hospital didn't mean that I could just skip my training. I arrived in the training ground 19. Let's play with that shunshin. Yeah. I recalled the memory from last night. Shisui's absolutely flawless shunshin. I activated my sharing. I molded my chakra in exactly the same way that Wo-I flew across the clearing at a ridiculous speed. Despite having only used the shunshin for a fraction of a second, the sheer speed of the thing was ridiculous. Especially using Shiu's ridiculously fast version, even with the Mangekyou Sharingan active, I could barely even perceive my movement at this speed. I would have to get used to Shiu's shin. This sort of speed required a deeper understanding of the movements as well as experience and instincts to along with it. I couldn't just rely on the Mangekyou to cheese the shinin with this one. Well, I could sort of, but not nearly to the extent that I had with the normal shinin. With this shin, I could also use a sword and really all forms of weaponry effectively. Without the need to use hand seals, my hands were free to hold whichever weapons I wished. I sent a bunch to the other end of the clearing. Just a normal genjutsu one. I drew a straight sword, a chakudo. Gathering my chakra, I performed the shunshin and rocketed across the clearing. I was aiming for where the clone's heart would have been had they been a real person. I missed, shooting way off to the side of the clone, crashing into a tree on the far end of the clearing. I shakily stood back up and dusted myself off. My hand glowed green with the mystic palm as I began to fix tiny cuts and bruises. I've got a lot of work to do. I shunted around for the rest of the afternoon, only stopping when the sun set. Not because it was getting dark, but because my chakra levels were beginning to dip. My shunshin still wasn't perfect, not quite like Shui's. It would require probably weeks of further refinement and practice to even pose a challenge to Shiwi. But it was a start and a damn good one. I spent the next week or so training with the shunshin and my various weapons, both training with them separately and using the weapons in tandem with the shu. In Chen, I noticed while training that the amount of chakra that my Mangekyou drained was significantly less than what it was before. I hardly noticed a strain anymore with the sharing. I guess that the eternal Mangekyou implant made things more efficient. I wouldn't keep the thing active all the time really just to fit in. But on missions, it couldn't hurt to keep it active for at least most of the time. I'm not sure why I'd need any other jutsu once I got the shunshin down. For most cases at least, the shinin was just so broken, at least at Shiu's level. Once I got everything down, which would just require more training and experience with the jutsu, and basically be able to win nearly every fight, it would just take some practice. Actually, a lot more practice than I had first realized. I hadn't quite appreciated the amount of work that Shiui put into his shin. It would take much longer than a few weeks of practice in order to even come close to Shiui's level. I hadn't even added the afterimage clone part of the thing, and it was already difficult. Speaking of Shiui, I was planning on meeting him again. I stood in a different training ground than I had been in when I met with Shiui the first time. I figured that it would at least help in not being detected if we met in a different clearing each time. I looked up. The moon and stars shone brightly in Konoha's unpolluted sky. The lack of industrial progress had made for a clear and beautiful night sky. As an Uchiha, the moon held a deeper meaning for me than most people. Pretty much family those guys were. I turned my focus back to the clearing. My sharing activated and span into pinwheels. Susanoo. The ridiculous pink rib cage formed a barrier around me. My sharing caught a flicker of chakra and I turned to my left. Shiui stared at me. He was more confident this time. I had caught him off guard the last time we met. Now we were on more even footing. You know, instead of having this convoluted system of signaling, we could just have, I don't know, LK'd to each other. Normally, if we were seen speaking to each other, then if one of us were caught conspiring against the clan, there might be the suspicion that the other is in as well. Yeah, but I mean, isn't there any better way of signaling? The Susanoo has a powerful and easily recognizable chakra signature that only I would recognize. And you, I suppose, if you had any chakra sensing jutsu, HN. I gave him the Uchiha grunt. Shiui was silent for a moment, considering his words. After an almost uncomfortably long silence, he spoke. How did you know? I'm my head at him. The coup, you're far too young to be sitting in on the councils. and my Manu Koto Amatsukami. How I my head at him. I paused for dramatic effect. There is Shiui, a realm outside of the plane in which we exist. I walked towards him slowly. The Mangekyou already active from performing the Susanoo to signal Shiui span in their sockets and flared. Fire water began to stream in from all sides. Alarmed, Shiui activated his sharing. Fire was an unbreakable genjutsu. Oh. Like all Mangekyou genjutsu were, so his sharing couldn't pierce through the illusionary water. Juboko. I had spread dandelion seeds all around the clearing before Shiui had arrived. Normally, a multitude of any kind of seed would arouse suspicion, especially for someone like Shiui, who'd noticed them right away. But it was around that time of year where the things were everywhere. So, a bit more seeds in one spot would hardly make anyone alarmed. The yellow dandelions began to poke through the surface of the water, their heads swaying violently in an imaginary wind. Shiu's sharing swived wildly in their sockets, trying to take everything in and evaluate whether or not they were a threat. Shiu's eyes narrowed at me. I'm not sure what jinatsu this is, but release me. Interesting. He found out. It was rather obvious after all. But since genjutsu that were specific to the Mangekyou like Tsukuyomi, Damaki, and indeed Fei were unbreakable save for very specific circumstances, there was nothing he could do about it. And there was no way that he could prove it either. This isn't a genjutsu, Shiui. It's a piece of the fractured reality that we live in. A lie. But I like screwing with people, and it'll be a reasonable explanation for my knowledge of the future. What do you know what lurks in the depths of these waters? Shiui. Shiu knelt in the shallow water that I had summoned. There is nothing. This water is far too shallow for anything to inhabit it. I my head at him and the water raised. Shu's eyes widened as the water that fooled even his sharing rose higher, encasing his lower body in fake icy cold water. That's what I like about fire compared to Damaki. It was complete with both touch and sound so that people would be able to feel the icy cold of fire and hear the lapping of ice waves. They grew the dandelions further. Their stems grew far thicker than any ordinary dandelion could become, and they twisted and grew around one another, forming tree-like structures that dripped with the waters of fire. I jumped onto one of the flowers, grown far out of proportion with Juboko, and gestured at Shiui to follow me. He hesitated for a moment, but followed. I sat down comfortably on the flower, Shiu slowly doing the same. I waved my hand for dramatic effect, and the floor of water that we had been standing in suddenly swirled into a chaotic whirlpool. When one dives into the shadowy trenches of this flooded world, there are eldritch secrets to be discovered. My voice was hardly more than a raspy whisper at this point. Never forget, Shiui, that some things were not meant for mortal eyes to see or mortal ears to hear. Man, I love unbreakable genjutsu. It was there in the abyss that I saw the threads of my fate. It was there in the infinite depths of this hour's ocean that I saw your fate and the entire clan's. I turned and looked right at Shiui. We must change it. Then all of the dandelions wilted, crumpling, and dumped us back into the water, which was shallow once more. The water became more and more shallow until it seemed to seep back into the ground. We had returned to the clearing, but I can't do it alone. My mortal body is weak, and I cannot change the course of fate by myself. I reached my out to Shiui. Will you help me? Shu's eyes span in a frenzy of movement, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. It wasn't a genjutsu. The infallible Sharingan could see through it after all. So, when one has eliminated the impossible, Shu's hand gripped mine. Of course, Kerr and I got out of the hospital about 3 weeks ago. We spent the time between then and now training mostly my auditory jutsu up to an acceptable level. They were difficult, especially without a medium like a flute, but they were useful as hell. We figured that we would go grab a mission. We stopped by the mission office to grab another C-rank mission. I wanted another bandit clearing mission because the last one went so well. No, really, I'm not even kidding. I've heard rumors that there was talk of Kurenai being promoted to Ratokabetu Junin. We were being talked about too. That last mission was very impressive. The last bandit clearing mission had been reclassified as a rank mission, and it's absolutely incredible that a Genin and a Tunin had managed to complete it completely casualty-free, even if one of us was severely injured. Usually those missions are reserved for teams of Tunin. Problem is though that we didn't even get a choice when it came to our mission this time. The guys at the mission told us that the Hokage was assigning us a mission personally. The Hokage met with most new gen teams for their first missions. Besides him actually enjoying meeting with the children, it fosters a sense of loyalty and respect when you personally meet the big boss. He couldn't give that sort of attention all of the time though, which is why he only personally assigned the first few. Teams with exceptional potential, however, were given the special treatment of the Hokage when it's CA. Meter mission assignments. Cannon's Team 7, for example, had their missions assigned to them personally by the Hokage, even the Danks. Karani and I, on the other hand, got our mission from the mission office, which is where most ninja go. The Hokage was giving us his personal attention, which meant that I now fit into the category of exceptional potential. You will be escorting Maruyama-san and his family to Yuga in the land of hot water. The Sandame gestured to the slightly overweight man and his family who were standing next to you. Hi, Hokage-sama, Karani said. She turned towards the clients. We leave tomorrow. Meet us at the village gates at 7 o'clock. The clients nodded their understanding and left the room. The Sandame closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. Kerr and I, you are dismissed, Hyuki. He opened his eyes and looked at me straight on. Remain here. We have much to discuss. Okay. Kerr and I bowed and began to leave, throwing a slightly worried look backwards at me before she exited. Ambu, leave. There was no sign of movement or even any Ambu at all, which I suppose makes sense for the ones that make up the Hoage personal guard. I might have been able to spot them had I activated my sharing, but I figured that this wasn't the time for that. Uhuki, the Hokage mused aloud. He leaned forwards. The Uchihas planned. Who? I stiffened immediately. So, it was that sort of conversation. Freaking who spilled the beans. Was it Itachi or was it Shiui? It was Shiui for sure. The Hokage wouldn't have wanted a conversation with me unless he knew from Shiui. Shiui was the only one who knew of my knowledge of the coup and the only one who had witnessed my Sasano and Genjutsu bullcrap. I suppose my appearance had pushed Shiui to tell the village authorities earlier. What about it? Shiui has told me that you have a plan. Quote. Yes, Shiui and I hadn't actually met again after the last time. I had tried to signal him with my Sasano twice, but he hadn't responded. I guess he was outside the village on a mission or something. I suppose I had implied that I had a plan though in our brief meetings. I trust Shishui and he trusts you. He smoked on his pipe, gazing outwards with a thoughtful expression. I will allow you two to carry on. I am trusting you both to quell the Uchiha rebellion before it even starts. Hi, Hokage-sama. I bowed and prepared to leave. I have not dismissed you yet, Huki. Okay, then this will be classified as an S-rank mission. Failure is not an option, Huki. Do you understand? The Hokage stared right at me. Do not disappoint me, Kyuki. That seemed like a rather final statement. I wanted to leave, but seeing as how the Hokage still hadn't dismissed me, I stood in the Hoage office waiting for him to finish up. Shui tells me that the Uchiha plan to rebel in 8 months' time. The Hokage closed his eyes and took another deep puff from his pipe. I am giving you 7 months to quell the thoughts of rebellion in the clan. Should your mission not be completed within that time frame, I will be left no choice but to take care of the Uchiha in a decidedly more forceful manner. Well, damn, the stakes are high, Kyuki. I do not wish to eliminate the Uchiha any more than you do. His lit with a cold, calculating fire. His chilling glare was leveled right at me, and I had to fight off the instinct to flinch. Do you understand? Hi, ho, dismissed. I made a hasty bow and quickly retreated. I had less time than I thought. I had estimated that I had about a year and a half to stop the massacre. I had only 7 months. Even still, that would be more than enough time. Shisu only needed a single night to brainwash the clan. The day that he got back would be the day that we started planning. Of course, I had a C rank that I was leaving for in an hour. So, really, we would start planning in whenever I got back. I checked over my gear and supplies. This wasn't a quick bandit clearing mission. This mission would take around a week, perhaps longer, due to slowest civilian speed we would be traveling at. The length of the mission called for being more prepared. Weapons, kanai, shuriken, sunburn, explosive tags, and my chakudo blade would be what I would use should a combat situation arise. I had scrapped most of the rest of my weapons like the Kamakusariyama and the battle guitar fan thing because I hardly used them. Flowers. With the newfound absence of the weapons, I had stuffed my storage seals with seeds. Flower seeds of every variety. I had poisonous ones with paralyzing qualities, and some of them were simply mundane flowers. Food. I had also brought a pack with me in preparation for the longer trip. The pack was full to the brim with food. My food of choice was standard shinobi rations, blocky gray squares packed to the brim with calories and nutrients. They were space efficient, and they would sustain me. They also lacked any taste. Storage seals would have been a more efficient place to put my things, but the bandages that my storage seals were written upon were a poor conductor of chakra. Normally, seals were written on a special chakra conductive paper, or if the user was particularly skilled, the seals could be written with chakra itself. However, my chosen medium was bandages. And while the inefficient seals were fine with most objects, they disagreed with organic matter, hence why I had to carry my rations in a pack. The rest of my supplies were thankfully not made of organic material and could be put into the storage seals. My seal watch flared. It was 6:30. I shrugged and decided to leave. I would arrive at the gates about 20 minutes early if I decided to walk, which I would. I figured that I would enjoy the view. It never hurt to be early either. A blond boy clad in the brightest, most orange outfit I've ever seen ran by laughing. He was being chased by several citizens, likely angry about some prank that he pulled. Ha! I almost forgot about him. The main character of this series. I wonder if I could implant his flesh into myself and get the Renegan. Karani's voice sounded from below me. Wake up. The clients will be here any minute. I was instantly alert. Many a lecture had been spent on the importance of being fully awake as quickly as possible. I peered upwards at the large gates of Konoha. I had gotten to the gates early and had chosen a nice spot in a tree near the gates to take a little nap before the mission. I jumped down from my branch and brushed any wrinkles out of my clothes. The high-collared Uchiha shirt with the clan symbol on the back had been irritating at first, but I gotten used to it. I walked towards the gate and took my place by Karani's side, and we waited. The clients finally came a minute and a half late. Tisk, tisk. They came riding a wagon which was drawn by oxen. I suppose it made sense. While this ninja could make it all the way to the land of hot water on foot, civilians couldn't be expected to do the same. Are you ready to leave? Kurini asked. Of course, the man, Mr. Maruyama. I believe he seemed like a rather cheerful guy. With a nod, Karani turned and with a few words exchanged between her and the tunin guarding the gates, walked through the gateway. I followed her and the wagon followed behind us. It was only around 2 hours later into our trip and I was already getting irritated. The client's kid was constantly whining loudly. Sighing in annoyance, I activated my eyes. I looked backwards at the child. My movement caught his eye and he looked right into my crimson sharing. I cast a tiny genjutsu on him. Really nothing major, just a little thing that would accentuate the glow of my eyes and make the shadows just a bit darker and just a little more looming and contain just a few more shadowy monsters. The kid immediately shut up. Ah. Good. The kid was one of those kids who, instead of whining or screaming louder, would just shut up when confronted with something scary. Thank goodness for small miracles. I turned my attention back to the road in front of us, observing the environment with new clarity with my Sharingan activated. I immediately saw our tail in the forest. I had noticed him about 10 minutes ago. He had been following us for perhaps longer. Even when I noticed him, I did nothing, not wanting to alarm him and scare him away. He was probably a scout for one of the more powerful and well-trained bandit groups. With my sharing, it was an easy task to watch for disturbances in the branches and leaves of the trees and predict his movements. Several sunburn coated in paralyzing solution appeared in my hand. I snapped my hand to the right and the thin needles flew exactly where I predicted that the bandit would be. A crash and a thud confirmed my hit. I looked backwards at the alarmed clients and then at Karani, who looked with dispassionate eyes at the spot in the forest where the bandit's fall had been heard. She had likely seen the bandit before as well. "I'll go check it out," I announced, walking off the side of the road and stepping into the forest. I swept the forest floor with my sharing, looking for the bandit. My eyes caught onto a chakra signature, and I walked towards it. The bandit was there, and he stared up at me with terrified eyes. His movements were restricted by the paralyzing solution on the Espen that had pierced him at various points. I estimated that from his build and chakra levels, he was either an academy dropout or a low-level genin. It justified his tree running, I guess. I grabbed his face in my hands and put it directly in front of mine, forcing him to look into my eyes. The crimson glow of my eyes were his entire world now, and he was drowning in a sea of blood-red irises. I grinned and slipped him an antidote to the paralyzing solution, spill. And so he did. With each word, my smile became wider and more inhuman. He finally finished speaking, slumping backwards in defeat. Oh, you've been such a help, but now I'm afraid. I drew a cane, my grin even wider than before, that you have run out of use. I stained the ground red. They call themselves the Kazoo. They're one of the more powerful bandit groups in the Land of Fire. They're hardly even a bandit group, really. More loosely organized collection of allied camps. Lots of them have some ninja training too. Her and I digested the information that I had gotten from the bandit. Do you have any idea of how powerful they are? They have about half a dozen major camps and a whole bunch of minor ones. The closest of their camps is about half a kilometer from here. That one has mostly civilian and low genin level guys. How many? About 30. Karani's eyes hardened. Take him out. I nodded and bowed, disappearing in a shunshin. Over the last few weeks ago, I had also gotten pretty good at the shunshin. I ended up bastardizing Shuu's perfect creation and making it much slower. I learned about a week into training with it that it would probably be more effective if I worked at slower speeds first. The fact that even my Mangekyou couldn't perceive my movement very well at the speed that Shiwi Shunshin was performed was testament to his skill. Working at slower speeds helped me gain familiarity with the jutsu so that one day I'd be able to perform the thing and rely on my instincts and muscle memory to guide me. For now though, I was working with a shunshin that was only half the speed of the one that I copied from Shiui, which was still more than double the speed of the shunshin I had been using before and Sealess. The speed that I was working with was a comfortable speed. I could go faster, but I wanted to be safe. I appeared on a branch that jutted out of a tree just outside of the camp borders. I observed the bandits below me milling about. I drew a cane from the seal on my glove and attached a low-grade explosive seal to it. I threw the cane off into the forest. It detonated, creating a moderately loud noise. The bandits jumped at the noise and drew their weapons. I put my hands to my mouth and imitated a bird call. My vocal cords saturated with chakra would vibrate and create a sound that would carry a genjutsu. My skill with auditory genjutsu was finally high enough that I could do this sort of thing. The genjutsu targeted some of the bandits. It planted a small suggestion in their minds, pushing them to figure out what the explosion was. I would separate them and take them out as small units rather than trying to take on all of them at once. I could engage them all and win. But I wanted to do everything using as few resources as possible. That was why I used the low-grade explosive tag instead of just throwing a standard explosive tag into the middle of the camp. Perhaps I was being overly paranoid, but I wanted to have some supplies and chakra in case there was something later on in the trip. 8 of the 30 bandits split off from the main group to investigate the noise. As they passed by my tree, I began to tail them from up high. When they got far enough away from the main group, I activated my Sharingan and dropped down from the trees. I drew 2 shuriken and threw them while I was descending. Both of them hit their intended targets in the throat and the 2 bandits dropped to the ground, gurgling on their own blood. 6 left. I drew a kanai and fell right on top of another bandit, slitting his throat. 5 left. A barrage of sunbi flew out of my hands and struck the rest of the bandits. The poison that the sunburn were coated in quickly kicked in and the remaining bandits dropped dead. 0 left. With no more enemies in sight, I deactivated my Sharingan. I made 7 of the normal illusionary clones. Searching through my perfect sharing-aided memories, I applied heens to all of my clones to make them in the likeness of 7 of the bandits that I had murdered. I took the place of the 8th one myself. With my clones, I began to walk back to the bandits' encampment. Hey, get over here. I had reached the border of the camp. My clones and I remained somewhat in the forest to conceal the fact that the clones had no shadows. What? Did you find anything? Yeah. Some dumbass ninja in the forest. They blew themselves up with one of those jutsu and they're all injured. If we hurry, we might be able to catch him for the bounties. The bandit I had talked to grinned and waved to the bandits behind him. Come on, you hear that, boys? There's a bounty to collect. The bandits began following me and my clones. In the forest, we split up. The clones leading half of the in one direction while I lead them in another. I replaced each of the missing bandits in each group with a rough bunch. They wouldn't hold up to close scrutiny. But right now, when no one was concerned, everything was fine. When we had gone a sufficient ways away from the other half of the bandits, I stopped. I turned around and did a head count. There were 13 bandits with me. The split in half hadn't quite been equal, resulting in more bandits being in this group and less in the other. There should be 9 in the group lead by my bunken then. Why are we stopping? One of the bandits asked. I grinned at him. Who knows? I unsealed a few espen from my storage seals. What are you? I threw the sunburn at the bandits, killing the one that had been speaking and 2 others. Drawing a cane, I quickly dashed into the group of bandits, slitting their throats gleefully as I ran by them. Within seconds, all 13 of them were lying on the forest floor, dead. They hadn't even gotten to draw their weapons. It wouldn't have mattered anyways. These bandits were lower level fighters, using mostly farming tools for weapons rather than the shinobi weapons that the more trained bandits wielded. Taking one last glance backwards at the dead bodies, I jumped into the trees, tracking the other group of bandits. After a few minutes of tree hopping, I found them following my clones in another part of the forest. I was getting impatient, so I forewent any real planning or pre-battle genjutsu, instead choosing to activate my sharing and jump right into it. With the sharing, I saw that based on their chakra signatures and muscle structure, this group of bandits were mostly low genin level, likely academy dropouts in comparison to the other group who were mostly civilian level. With their training, they managed to react quickly enough to actually sling some kanana and shuriken at me. I dodged some of the thrown weapons and deflected others with my own cane. I unsealed kana and shuriken from my seals, throwing them all in a barrage of steel. Only a few of them actually hit their marks, downing 3 bandits. That wasn't an issue. Hitting them wasn't exactly the primary goal. Anyways, I had attached ninja wire to the back of the kanai and shuriken and applied doti to them. Ninja wire was basically invisible anyways, but its metallic nature made it glint harshly in the light. A cheap application of domechi was all it took to really mask their presence. I pushed a bit of chakra through the string and pulled. The strings swung around the weapons at their ends, acting as weights to pull them. The wire wrapped around all of the bandits, entrapping them in a mess of steel wires. The fight was basically over, so I deactivated my sharing. I pulled again. The strings enforced with chakra cut through flesh with ease, cutting the bandits into pieces and spraying blood everywhere. That's all of them, I guess. I completed the objective relatively efficiently with minimal resource loss on my part. All I had used in terms of weapons were things that I had tons of. Kunai, shuriken, sunbi and wire. I hadn't used any expensive jutsu. Genjutsu for the most part costed little in terms of chakra, so my reserves were more or less topped off. Excellent. I did a quick body count of the bandits to confirm the completion of the objective before I left. I counted 8 heads on the ground. There were supposed to be 9. I activated my sharing gun and checked again. There was a minuscule disturbance in the ground. It was a characteristic of an amateur performing the hiding like a mole jutsu. Normally the jutsu would leave no trace on the ground, but when an inexperienced user used the jutsu, sometimes they'd make mistakes like this. One of them had gotten away. They got away when I deactivated my sharing, believing that the battle was already won. I went and followed the disturbances in the ground. It only went a short way into the forest, just outside of my visual range from my previous position. The trail went cold and I couldn't see any chakra signatures out in the forest. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.